What's up, Chaos Shinobi here. This is what if overpowered Naruto shows his true power. Summary: Naruto is the younger twin brother of Nawaki, jinchuuriki of the Kyuubi. Pushed aside from his family in favor of his brother, Naruto grows up as an outcast to his own family. However, on the fateful night of the Uchiha Massacre, his life changes for better or for the worse. Chapter 1: Awakening of Uchiha Madara. Naruto walked through the streets of Konoha, his face brimming with tears. Tonight was his 7th birthday, a day where a child is supposed to celebrate together with his parents. But his birthday in existence was ignored and forgotten by his so-called parents. Instead, they opted to focus all their attention on his heroic older twin brother Nawaki. Naruto and Nawaki. They were like different sides of the same coin, like the sun and the moon. Naruto was a carbon copy of his father. He was lean for his and slightly above average height. His sky blues, however, were dimmed with sadness and betrayal. Like his father, his hair was spiky yellow and reached his mid-back. Once upon a time he had imitated his father's hairstyle, specifically hoping to gain the attention of his parents, but it was all for naught. There was time when Naruto was like any other kid, full of life and brightness. However, now Naruto was quiet and full of sadness. Cultivated through the neglect of his parents and the bullying brother. In his sadness, Naruto turned to books, hoping to one day become powerful enough to gain the attention of his parents. Nawaki was a mixture, to say, of his parents. He had blonde hair, but it was not as vibrant as Naruto's, and a chubby build that he had gotten from being spoiled to the core. His eyes were caramel brown. He had never known of anything else but of life of luxury where he could do no wrong. This in turn had given him a rotten personality. He would play pranks, both harmless and harmful, and blamed on someone else once he had ascertained that he could get away with it. More often than not, the scapegoat was Naruto. Nawaki, having everything given to him on a whim, had in turn made him lazy and arrogant, believing himself to be a gift from Kemi. The two brothers hated each other. Naruto hates Nawaki for his despicable attitude and actions towards him, and for stealing all the attention away from his parents, as more likely than not Nawaki would do something to draw Minato's and Tsunade's attention away from him. Nawaki on his part simply despised Naruto for his existence, seeing him nothing but a mistake in his perfect world. Naruto kept walking and walking, not knowing where to go. Suddenly he heard a scream to his right. To his self-trained reflex, Naruto turned to the source of the sound. It was from the Uchiha district. Naruto began running to the entrance of the Uchiha district, and passed through, going to the source of the sound. Naruto had a sense of dread as he saw the silence from the Uchiha clan's compound, with the still wet blood increasing the dread. Once he had arrived, he found his classmate Sasuke lying on the ground writhing in agony, with his brother Itachi standing in front of him. "Naruto-sama, why are you here?" Itachi asked. Naruto on his part gulped as he stared into Itachi's emotionless cold black eyes. I heard a scream. Naruto replied with a shaking voice. "I see," Itachi said as he looked into Naruto's blue eyes. "I'm sorry, Naruto-sama, please forgive me for this." Itachi's previous dull black eyes lit up to show the signature ability of the Uchiha clan, the Sharingan. Itachi wasn't done, however. His Sharingan's domos began to merge to form a tri-pronged shuriken. "Tsukuyomi!" "Ah!" Naruto screamed as he felt thousand of sharp objects pierce him. To his relief, it wasn't much longer that he lost consciousness. When Naruto opened his eyes again, he didn't know where he was. All that he knew was that he was in a clan compound, a very rich and powerful clan by the looks of it. Naruto looks around to see anybody else, but to his surprise he saw no one, even though the compound was very large. Curious, Naruto stood up and started to walk around. Naruto found that there were various rooms. Each room contained various amounts of scrolls and books that had large amounts of knowledge in what seemed like a journal of someone's life. Naruto, who developed a habit of learning everything he can, even though he stopped trying to impress his parents, so he began to read starting from the basics. Once Naruto had finished what he wanted, he went outside and noticed that the sun hadn't even moved. What's more, he noticed that he wasn't even hungry. "Strange, I know that I haven't been reading for at least a couple of hours now, but why am I not hungry?" Suddenly Naruto recalled some information he'd just read. It said that for some shinobi they had an inner world where their inner mind created a world based on the person. But if that's true, why is there so much knowledge here? I don't recall having learned so much. Deciding that he wanted to find out, Naruto continued to walk to what he instinctively knew as the center of the compound. As he neared the compound, Naruto looked in bewilderment at the clan symbols that were engraved into the walls. They were the clan symbol of the Uchiha clan. Naruto suddenly was reminded about Itachi and the clan massacre, but he shook those thoughts out of his head, not wanting to remember the horrific event. Naruto continued to walk towards the middle of his inner world. When he made it to the center, he found a man with long black hair and red shinobi armor from the olden days, chained and glowing grew chains that felt like chakra. Black chakra seemed to forcibly exude out of the man and follow the chain up to the sun. At least that seemed like where the chain came from. But what surprised him the most was the kanji for seal that was in front of the man. But who is the man? It seemed to me as he is sealed inside me. But who is he? Naruto kept pondering to himself, but suddenly it clicked. Naruto had read from the scrolls about Senju Hashirama and the encounters with him. There was only one person who could have known that much about the Shodaime and survived that many times. The man before him was Uchiha Madara. But why is he sealed inside me? Could it be that Sundaime-sama sealed it inside me the day he sealed the Kyuubi inside Nawaki? No, it couldn't be possible. Uchiha Madara is long dead. Resolving to find out, Naruto went back to the various rooms and began reading. As Naruto read the scrolls and books absorbing knowledge, days and weeks passed, at least that was what it seemed Naruto. Naruto learned that some of the rooms were locked and no matter what Naruto did he could never get in. It seemed like the knowledge inside there could not be accessed at the moment, so Naruto changed his goal to learn how to exit his mind and enter it. But that didn't mean Naruto didn't read the scrolls or books that interested him. Far from it, Naruto actually spent more time reading than to find a way out. Among those books contained various chakra control exercises, chakra affinity, use of Sharingan, and a whole lot of jutsus. The reason Naruto read about how to use the Sharingan was simple. He figured that he was absorbing Madara's powers from the chain as it connected to the sun, to which Naruto thought represented him. One day Naruto finally found the information he needed. He read it once, twice, and even thrice before he attempted. He sat down in a meditative position and closed his eyes before starting to concentrate. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself staring at a wide ceiling. Hospital, huh? With a groan he got up. Looking around he saw no one at his beside. Naruto looked down depressingly. "Ah, hello." A voice cut through the silence. He looked up to see a sliver-haired shinobi with a small ponytail and glasses looking him. "Why, yes?" Naruto asked, finding out that his mouth was quite dry. The shinobi, who seemed to be a Junon, sighed in relief. Annoyance? Naruto didn't know, but the Junon took care of Naruto, bringing him up to date. Naruto found out from Kabuto, the name that the Junon in front him gave to him, that he had been unconscious for about a month and a half. Yet no one visited him, no one. Naruto clutched his fists angrily at that. Thanking Kabuto and doctor that Kabuto brought, Naruto went back to sleep knowing that he will able to be discharged tomorrow. Naruto walked towards his house, the Namikaze estate, after having just been discharged from the hospital. When he walked inside he saw no one greeted him. His father was said to be meeting the fire daimyo this week, so it was to be expected. His brother was probably at the ninja school while his mother was inside the house. Naruto looked around the house before finding his mother at the garden. Naruto walked towards his mother and stood in front of her. "What do you want, bastard?" she said with venom lacing every word. Bastard, that was what she called him whenever Minato wasn't around. Naruto studied her. For as long as he could remember, his mother hated but she doted and loved Nawaki, who was said to be his twin brother. Was it because he was second-born? Was it? Naruto intended to find out. "Why do you hate me? Am I not your son?" Naruto asked pleadingly. His mother, Namikaze Senjutsunade, looked at Naruto's eyes with her own, staring into them for an indefinitely amount of time. Suddenly she slapped Naruto in the cheek, so hard it made him bleed from his nose and mouth. She then started laughing. It wasn't mocking, it was as if she found it truly funny. When she had stopped she directly looked at Naruto. "You finally asked the question, huh? Well, let me tell you. You aren't my son, in fact we aren't even related. You're a son of the whore, Uzumaki Kushina. Let me tell you the truth, Uzumaki," Naruto Tsunade said, deliberately using Uzumaki. "Your father Minato was in love with me. But suddenly your whore of a mother seduced him. It wasn't that much important after all. I did make every effort to make her life hell. But I found out that she was pregnant. Just like me, we're both pregnant for about the same number of time. I wanted to kill you right then and there, but your father said no. Then something wondrous happens, Tilda. Your mother, the former jinchuuriki of the Kyuubi, died and unleashed the Kyuubi. Sarutobi-sensei died sealing it, but your mother died too." With that said, Tsunade kicked Naruto into the air. Hard enough it would leave bruises, but no permanent damage. Naruto swore that on that day he would grow powerful enough to make them regret ever doing this to him. As he laid on the ground coughing and trying to get up, he was already forming plans. 3.5 years later. Naruto checked his scroll, making sure that everything he prepared for the last 3 years was there and ready to be taken with him. Naruto now had grown taller since that day. He was currently 1/4 of a head taller than Nawaki. His face had become slender and slightly girlish, but it was one that portrayed confidence and intelligence, unlike Nawaki, who was still as troublemaking and brash. Speaking of troublemaking, 6 months ago his father had found out Nawaki was using Naruto as a scapegoat, but all he received was a slap on the wrist, nothing like the confinement Naruto received as punishment. And much to Naruto's horror, he had fangirls, Yes, you heard right, fangirls. Shivering at the thought of those demonic beasts, Naruto put the scroll in his pouch, which was tied to his left side, onto the sash. On the same sash there was a chokudo there on his backside. For clothing, Naruto had a black high-collared Uchiha-style long-sleeve shirt and black shinobi pants with black sandals. He had wristband on both of his arms with the summoning symbol on them. It was much like the clothing Uchiha Madara had during the clan wars when he didn't wear his red shinobi armor. Speaking of the Uchiha clan, there was the clan symbol of the back of Naruto's shirt that you could see, with Naruto's waist-length vibrant blonde hair that was styled much like Madara's. Silently jumping out of his window, Naruto began to run through the streets of Konoha. It was much safer on the road than on the roof, as most of the ninjas stationed there would look at the roof instead of the road. As Naruto ran, he thought about all the preparation he did for this day, the day he would escape Konoha. Years ago, after the shocking revelation, Naruto had confirmed that he had the Sharingan. Although at first it only had about 2 tomos in one eye and 1 in the other, through training Naruto had managed to evolve them to the fully mature version at age 9. Of course, he only trained with it when he was sure no one was looking, and he sure as hell didn't tell anyone, especially his mother. After he gained 3 tomos in each, he found out that more rooms in his mindscape had been unlocked, some of which told Naruto about the EMS. It only 6 months ago that Naruto could start using the EMS, and even now those jutsus drained Naruto of quite a large amount of chakra, even with the large amount he already had from being a son of a jinchuuriki, Hokage, and siphoning Madara's own power and chakra. In the past few years, Naruto had been slowly stealing his father's Hiraishin no Jutsu kunais, taking only a little amount each time so that his father wouldn't notice. He had also copied the scrolls of various jutsu into a scroll that he had on him. It consisted of the Hiraishin no Jutsu, Rasengan, and many Raiten, Fuuten, and Kaden jutsus. That wasn't all. Naruto had made Kakashi show him his prize technique, Chidori. Naruto used his Sharingan to copy the jutsu. Discreetly, of course. He didn't want his secret to be found out so soon after all. He also looked and found files on his mother. From what Naruto gathered, first, his father was in love with his mother first and Tsunade second. The reason his father even loved Tsunade was because his father, Namikaze effing Minato, broke up with his mother Kushina and started to go out with Tsunade. But he and his mother made up and started to go out again. But it turned out Minato didn't dump Tsunade, no, he started to two-time both of them. Damn bastard, Naruto thought. But there was a good thing that came out of it. Naruto found out he could use chakra chains much like his mother, but they were thinner and weaker from what he read about it. Maybe strength came with usage, Naruto had thought. Naruto hadn't just trained his mind, in the past 3.5 years. No, he also made sure to train his body in taijutsu and kenjutsu. While he trained it, he had met a girl named Tenten who admired Tsunade and wanted to become like her, much to his disgust. The only reason he met Tenten regularly was to buy kunais and shurikens to practice with and other tools such as chakra weights. But, thinking back, he had formed a small bond of friendship with her, but it wasn't to stop him from leaving. It was enough, however, for him to leave a letter detailed with the truth behind Tsunade and his family. Hopefully it would snap her out of her delusions about the so-called slug Sanin and Kunoichi that every one of them should strive to be like. Naruto also didn't neglect to train his chakra control either, otherwise it would hinder him too much, as his chakra capacity grows at a fast rate and would be too late to hone it to as near perfection as he could like at this moment. Naruto had also trained with Kaden and Raiten jutsus, and he had found out his main chakra affinity was lightning. He knew that his fire affinity wasn't that far behind as long he kept using Kaden jutsus. He had also practiced some low Fuuten jutsus just to boost his Kaden jutsus. Despite all this, Naruto was only average in the eyes of many. Why? It was because Naruto deliberately held back in the Shinobi Academy. He didn't want people to find out strong he was after all. Much Naruto's amusement, he was somehow always one place in front of Nawaki, much to the latter's hatred. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts when he was nearing the gates. As he neared the gates, he saw that the gatekeepers were Izumo and Kotetsu, the infamous duo known to sleep on the job. Not that Naruto wasn't thankful, in fact Naruto was very thankful to whatever kami there was that gave such a good opportunity. Today's the day Namikaze Senju Naruto dies, and the birth of the Nidaime Uchiha Madara. Chapter 2, Soifan and meeting Nawaki again. Namikaze-sama, please come back with us, or we'll be forced to use lethal force to bring you back. One of the Chunins in a squad of 4 cried out to Naruto. No, it should be Madara now. It had about 2 years, give or take a few weeks, since Madara had ran away from Konoha no Sato. He had changed very little except for a few features. Madara's eyes, which used to be cerulean blue, was now royal navy blue, and of course he had grown taller as he was 12 years old now, but he looked more like he was 13. Madara's physical features weren't the only thing that had changed. His chakra capacity had grown and currently exceeds Chunin levels, and the color, which used to be as blue as his former eye color, was now gray near black. The color change was a result of absorbing the original Madara's chakra, and as a result of how sinister it was, it also tainted his current chakra. The blonde-haired preteen's elemental affinity for lightning had also grown strong due to his near-constant usage and practice using Chidori, to the point that most of his Raiten jutsus had gained a black tint, and other than that he had also gained a fire affinity, although it was not as strong as his lightning affinity. "How many times do I have to tell you? My name is Uchiha Madara, and I refused," Madara said with voice full of contempt. Activating his Sharingan, Madara charged at the first Chunin that was nearest to him, and coincidentally the one who asked him to come back to the hellhole known as Konoha. The poor unnamed Chunin didn't even have the chance to move before a Chidori pierced his heart. Madara pulled his hand out of the dead Chunin's body and jumped back to avoid the three other Chunins who had begun to move and close in on him, all with a kunai in hand. He formed a series of hand seals and sucked in his breath. Katen, Great Fireball Jutsu. A large fireball the size of a 10-foot boulder was spewed from Madara's mouth at the closing Chunins. Sutin, multiple water bullets. A Chunin called out as he too spewed out a jutsu, only this time it was 10 water spheres, 1/4 the size of the fireball Madara spewed. The two jutsus clashed, and as a result steam was made and covered the battlefield, which was a clearing in a forest. Taking this chance, Madara unsheathed his Chokudo and charged it with lightning chakra, making it vibrate at a high speed, and leapt towards the Chunin that used the Sutin jutsu. His opponents couldn't see through the steam, but it could not be said for the same for Madara, as his Sharingan easily saw through the not chakra-laced steam. "Ugh!" screamed the Chunin as he felt the Chokudo pierce through his body and through his heart. Suddenly Madara was kicked from the side and flew towards a tree. When his body hit the trunk of the tree, a white smoke engulfed it and a log replaced his body, signifying that Madara used the substitution technique. Madara himself was up at a tree branch looking at the two remaining Chunins. One of them was Mizuki, a teacher at the Shinobi Academy, and the other he didn't know but was quite tall and had a muscular build, more so than most Chunins, telling Madara that that particular Chunin probably focused on taijutsu. The two Chunins and Madara stared at each other as if contemplating what to do. Finally Mizuki moved. He took one of the giant shurikens from his back and launched it at Madara with the intent to kill. "Mizuki, stop. Did you forget our orders? Hokage-sama wants his son alive." The nameless Chunin shouted at Mizuki. Madara for his part didn't move from his spot on the branch and instead closed his eyes. Mizuki smiled evilly, while the other Chunin gasped in horror, not wanting to explain to his leader why his son was dead when he had specifically told them not to kill him at any cost. When Madara opened his eyes again, his body was covered in a thick layer of gray near black lightning, and there was the sound of 1,000 chirping birds coming from him. Madara used his left arm and deflected the shuriken barehanded without the use of any weapon or his chokudo, as he had already sheathed it. There wasn't even a scratch on his skin from the shuriken, making the Chunin duo gasp in shock. The lightning that covered Madara's body was a technique he created called Chidori Sheru, 1,000 bird shell. It was a jutsu based off the Sundaime and Yondaime Reikage's lightning armor, only it used Chidori as a base. Madara created the jutsu to supplement his body's strength and speed because he was still young, and being young as he was, his body wasn't developed enough for taijutsu against stronger opponents, and so he would be at a disadvantage at close combat. Like the lightning armor, it greatly increases his power and speed, not only that, it also hardens his skin and clothes like the original technique, while giving a shock to any opponents who touches him without protection from it. Unfortunately, it doesn't increase his reaction speed or nerves, but that defect was corrected through the use of the Sharingan like its derived jutsu Chidori. Currently Madara was unable to call it as quickly as Chidori, and so during a battle Madara must take time to concentrate to use it with no hand seals, or go through a series of hand seals that consisted of more than 20 hand seals. Madara ran down the tree towards them at such high speeds that the two Chunins could only see a blonde and black blur headed towards them. Squelch! A sickening sound was heard as the nameless Chunin looked down at his body to see Madara stabbing him with the Yellow Flash's famous tri-pronged kunai. Before he knew it, his eyes rolled back into his head and he fell onto the ground dead. "PP, please let me. Forgive me. I promise I'll tell Hokage-sama that you don't want to go back." Mizuki, the white-haired Chunin, begged as he fell onto his bum and tried to crawl away. Madara slowly began walking towards him with his Chidori Sheru dissipating as he walked towards the son of a gun. As Madara neared Mizuki, Mizuki suddenly launched him with a kunai in hand. But he unexpectedly stops with his kunai inches away from Madara's face. Mizuki's body suddenly fell onto his knees before Madara with his eyes glazed over. "Tell me, Mizuki-sensei, what happened after I left Konoha?" Madara asked Mizuki as his Sharingan eyes stopped spinning. "After you left, the whole village was in uproar as Hokage-sama sent many teams of Onbu after you. After a week they gave up, but Hokage-sama gave an S-ranked mission to every team, that was the capture of his son, alive. Mizuki replied with saliva coming out of his mouth. What about my brother and Tsunade? Madara asked again. Tsunade-sama for some reason seemed overjoyed at your departure, although she tried to hide it. Nawaki-sama was very happy and even began to brag about how he was the one who made your life hell by purposely getting you trouble along with Inuzuka Kiba. This in turn infuriated Hokage-sama. He punished Nawaki-sama dearly. Currently Nawaki-sama is 5th place in class, falling behind Uchiha Sasuke, Hyuga Hinata, Yamanaka Ino, and Haruno Sakura. Mizuki replied once again. Madara nodded, taking in the information, not knowing what to think. He killed Mizuki by slitting his throat and began walking away deep in thought. He decided that it didn't matter much as Nawaki was still his disgusting half-brother. His feeling of disgust and hatred slightly increased, as well as his feeling towards Tsunade. But he was conflicted about his father, Namikaze Minato. On one hand he was abused because of Minato not caring enough for him, but that could be attributed to Tsunade's manipulations and his duty as Hokage, which kept him busy. On the other hand, he hated his father for abandoning his mother like that and not seeing his abused state. Madara gave a sigh. Only time will tell, huh? Madara took out the tri-pronged kunai that he just used to kill the Chunins with and wiped the blood off. He still hadn't taught himself the Hiraishin no Jutsu, mostly because it would take too much time and must be done in a safe environment. Something Madara currently does not have. Madara places away the kunai into his pouch. He then stretched his hand out and plucks a leaf from one of the bushes. Staring intently at the leaf, he tried to insert his fire chakra into. At first it began to blacken and smolder a bit, but suddenly it hardened immensely, brimming with black electricity. Damn, I still can't get the hang of it. Every time that it looked like I was about to succeed, I somehow always used my lightning chakra at the last minute. Madara thought with frustration. It was justified since he had just begun his elemental chakra training for his fire affinity after he finished his lightning chakra affinity. But it seemed that his lightning affinity was too strong and would interfere with his fire chakra. Either that or he was doing it wrong. Madara groaned out in frustration as he threw away his most recently hard as a kunai metal leaf. He decided he was going to continue training to use Rasengan. Stalking out his left hand with his palm opened, he began to gather a chakra. Okay, first gather the chakra and spin it like multiple spirals. In his hand, translucent black chakra began to gather into his hand and spin in multiple spirals. Now add the power to it. The chakra in his hand began to get darker and condense, but suddenly it exploded. Madara was blown back and nearly crashed into a tree, but luckily he flipped in midair and landed onto the tree with his feet before jumping down onto the ground. Okay, maybe this isn't the best time and place to train, Madara said to himself as he thought about how dangerous it currently was to train at the moment while walking and concentrating on something, knowing enemies could jump out at any moment. Plus he should count himself lucky that he hadn't exhausted himself yet after killing those 4 Chunins. With a sigh, Madara continued to his traveling to wherever it takes him. Slurp. Madara sighed in bliss as he ate the foods of the gods. You guessed, he was eating ramen. Piles upon piles of bowls laid next Madara as people stared at him, wondering, where in the hell does he fit it? It had about a few weeks since Madara's defeat of the 4 Konoha Chunins. He had arrived at Totsuku town just today. Madara hadn't eaten anything yet, so he was hungry. Suddenly he was attracted to a heavenly smell. It led him the town's most famous ramen stall. To Madara's immense fury, he found a couple of thugs trying to extort from the owner, and so in an act of God, he punished them for tainting the sacred place. The stall owner was so grateful that he allowed Madara to eat as much as he liked for free. Oh, that was the wrong thing to say, because judging by his face he had at the moment, he was regretting saying that to Madara. With a satisfied burp, Madara left the stall, leaving some Ryo that he knew would pay for everything he ate. Despite being told he was able to eat for free, he declined in the end. Madara still has a sense of honor, you know. Well, that and the fact the food was so good it would be a shame to close down because he ate too much without paying. Madara walking through the roads of Totsuku, enjoying the peace and joy that radiated in the air of the town. It was nice, Madara thought, being able to walk with other humans once in a while. But there was one thing that bothered him: there is someone following him. Madara began to walk towards the exit of the town. When he had done so, he walked to a barren clearing with some large rocks. You can come out now, Madara said, as if talking to no one at all. Suddenly a black blur appeared in front of him a couple meters away. Madara activated his Sharingan. The black blur was actually a petite female. She had short black hair that framed her face and 2 long braids that were bound in a white cloth ending with a golden ring. Her choice of clothing was a simple white haori that only barely reached past her waist. Her arms were covered long black armbands and she had black kung fu-like baggy pants with tabi for shoes. What do you want? Madara asked, looking at his stalker. He noticed that he could see a katana handle parallel to the ground on her waist, but the sheath was quite short. Must be a wakizashi. Madara observed. Suddenly the girl before him kneeled and bowed before him. My name is Soifan, a kunoichi from the village of Nadeshiko. I request your help. Madara was surprised but he kept his face stoic. And why would I help you, Soifan-san? Madara asked, intrigued as to why a kunoichi from the Nadeshiko village would request his help. He had heard that the village was one based on a matriarchal system, where men had little to no standing. Because Madara raised an eyebrow slightly at this, wondering why she knew his name. If you do, we of the Nadeshiko village will indebted to you and will answer to your call whenever you are in need of help. Oh? That's quite the offer, but I have to wonder what is it I must help you in order to gain that much sway with your people? Madara asked while now considering the idea. Madara-san, our errand princess, Shizuka-sama has been kidnapped by Gato of Gato Enterprises and he wants us to submit to him. Naturally we cannot do this, but we cannot allow him to harm Shizuka-sama either. Reinforcements arriving from the village will be too late. Please Madara-san help us, Soifan said as she bowed her head further down, almost touching the ground by now. And why me? Soifan didn't look up as she answered. You may not know of it, but your fame precedes you. Your name is Uchiha Madara, or so you call yourself. Your mastery over the Sharingan at such a young age has people calling you the Crimson-Eyed God. A prodigal genius that has mastered several high-ranking jutsus, including most of which are Raiten jutsus. Rumored to be included in your jutsu arsenal is Chidori, the famed assassination technique created by Sharingan no Kakashi, and having a jutsu much like the Yondaime Reikage's lightning armor. And you are labeled as an A-ranked missing nin with a bounty of 50 million ryo to be preferably captured alive by the request of many nations. Madara took in the information, not knowing that he was that famous or infamous depending on the point of view. He scoffed when Soifan said missing nin. He clearly wasn't a shinobi of any hidden village, yet they labeled him a missing nin? The idea was simply amusing to him. If I help her, I would have the support of a whole village, but on the other hand I might not succeed in rescuing the princess, which might result in the village hunting me down. Plus this Gato of Gato Enterprise, one of the richest men in the world, if I aggravate him too much he might want my head. Madara thought in his mind, but attacking one of the most richest men in the world, that would be an adequate challenge. Very well, Madara said to Soifan as she raised her. Thank you Madara-san, Soifan said as she stood up. Please follow me. The Nadeshiko kunoichi said as started to walk. Soifan-san, are you the only one? Madara asked as he started to walk with her, but still keeping a safe distance just in case this was a trap. He saw her make a pained face before she answered. We had one other companion, Tokiwa-senpai, Shizuka-sama's attendant, but they were both captured in my stead so I could escape. Madara studied Soifan closely, finding out that her regret and guilt of escaping without her companion was genuine. He reaches forward and grasped her shoulder. Wait, Madara said as Soifan turns toward him. Yes Madara-san? I have a quicker way, Madara said as took his hand back and bit into his thumb so that some blood leaked from it. He went through in rapid succession a series of hand seals and slammed it onto the ground. Kushios no Jutsu. Poof! A giant crow of at least 7 meters long from head to tail appeared. Madara jumped onto the crow's back. He had taken the crow summoning scroll during one of his days in his 3.5 years of preparation. The summoning contract was in the secret room at the Uchiha clan's Naka shrine. I think this was correct, tell me if I was wrong, along with various other equipments that he'd taken from there, such as his close and chokudo, that being the reason there was an Uchiha clan symbol engraved on it. Think Sasuke's chokudo, only more rectangular and pure black. Come on, Madara says as he looks at Soifan, who was staring at him with her mind going at 1,000,000 miles per hour. Ah yes, she said as she too jumped behind Madara. Go, Madara commanded his summon, and with that the crow took off. Soifan had almost fallen off when the black bird first took flight. It was only thanks to Madara, who wrapped his arm around her, that she hadn't fallen off. Thank you, Soifan said quietly and blushing, half in embarrassment at being caught looking weak and the other half due to the close proximity of her face to Madara's face. Madara didn't say anything as he moved her so that she could stand behind him without falling off. The trip to Nami no Kuni, which was the headquarters of Gato Enterprise and where Shizuka and Tokiwa were imprisoned, took about 5 to 4 hours thanks to the summon Madara had used as they were flying. During the trip neither of them talked much as they both were shinobi of few words. By the time they arrived it was already night time. After they had landed and dispelled the summoning, Madara followed Soifan, who led him to the family that had graciously allowed her to stay when she was recovering after escaping Gato. They walked to a house on wooden platform above a lake. Knock. Knock. Soifan's hands sounded as they made contact with the wooden door. Coming. The voice of the woman said, and by the sound of it she was around her 30s or less, Madara thought. The door opened to reveal a slim woman of average height, black hair and eyes, wearing some loose-fitting pants and a pink shirt. Her eyes lit up in recognition. "Soifan-chan. You're back. And who's this with you?" she questioned, looking at Madara. "I'm her friend," the blonde Sharingan user casually answered. Soifan nodded, content with Madara's answer. "Hello, my name's Tsunami. And what is yours?" Tsunami asked. "My name is Madara, Uchiha Madara." Madara replied. She smiled and said, "Please come in, Soifan-chan, Madara-kun." As she moved away from the door to allow the duo in, Soifan walked first, followed by Madara. When Madara walked in, he froze at what he saw. There, sitting near the table, was a team of Konoha shinobi. The Konoha shinobi were namely Hatake Kakashi, Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and finally Namikaze Senju Nawaki. "Why are you here?" Madara growled out dangerously, placing his hand on the handle of his chokudo, ready to unsheath it at a moment's notice and letting loose a small amount of killing intent. The three genins, much to Madara's surprise, weren't that affected by his killing intent, although their hands reached for their kunai pouch, wary of Madara. Kakashi was already out of his chair in front of the table with a kunai in hand, ready to defend his students. Soifan looked back and forth between them before finally deciding to stand next Madara with her hand on her wakizashi, much like Madara. There was also an old man on the table with a small child there, visibly affected by Madara's killing intent as they were shaking. Tsunami, who was not the target or anywhere near the target of Madara's killing intent, was not affected. Tsunami, in an attempt to diffuse the clearly visible tension, started to speak. "Madara-kun, you see, they are the team of Konoha shinobi that my father hired in order to protect him and the bridge from Gato. This is Soifan-chan and Madara-kun. Their companions was captured by Gato, and so they are. Soifan was living here for a day or two before she went to find someone to help her. She brought back Madara-kun over here." Madara and Soifan continued their stare-off with the Konoha team, neither giving any implication that they heard Tsunami's explanation. Finally Madara made a tch sound before walking out of the door he came in from, saying, "Soifan-san, I will be nearby the house if you are looking for me." Soifan nodded, indicating that she heard him, before bowing and apologizing to Tsunami. "I apologize, it seems my companion has some bad experiences with Konoha in his past," she told the bridge builder's daughter. After Madara had left, each member of the Konoha team, otherwise known as Team 7, each had different thoughts about the newcomers. Kakashi was thinking about how the blonde boy called Madara that had just left. He looked so much like Sensei, so much like Naruto-kun. Is it possible it was him? But if it was him, why would he appear here of all places? And I heard he traveled alone. Plus his eyes were blue before, and the boy before me has royal navy blue colored eyes. But if it was him, I have so much questions I want to ask, such as why he left and many more. I wonder if Nawaki noticed how much he looked like Naruto-kun. Sasuke too had different thoughts, but they were on a different topic. Who was he? Is he strong? Sasuke thought as he remembered how the blonde who Tsunami said was Madara let loose some killing intent on them, and how Kakashi was wary of him by actually taking a kunai out and taking a battle stance. Plus there was also the fact that there was the Uchiha clan symbol on his sword. But does this mean he is an Uchiha? But I thought Nissan killed them all, and I have never heard of a blonde Uchiha before. Nawaki's thoughts contained something similar, only the majority of them weren't on the blonde. Who was that blondie? Whoever he is wouldn't stand a chance against me, Nawaki thought confidently. But who is the girl? She's cute, I should invite her to come with me back to Konoha. She wouldn't refuse, after all I am Namikaze Senju Nawaki, no girl should be able to say no to me. Sakura's thoughts were the simplest of all of them, namely who was he? And his aura kinda reminded me of Sasuke-kun. That night Kakashi, Nawaki, and Sasuke slept in one room. Sakura slept in a room by herself, and Soifan slept in the same room as Tsunami due to her being uncomfortable near potential enemies such as the Konohans. Madara, however, was a different story. He was currently standing in the forest near the sound surrounding by trees with his eyes closed. Suddenly they opened and a translucent black lightning surrounded his body with the sound of over 1,000 chirping birds. Madara had activated his Chidori Shiru. In an instant Madara drew his Chokudo that was also covered in a thin layer of lightning and cut down the trees surround him. The cut was so clean that a reflection could be seen reflecting off the stump where the tree was. Madara didn't stop there. He continued to run around in the forest at a furious pace, cutting down many trees along his way. Although Madara looked calm at the outside with his Sharingan activated, inside he was furious. He wasn't furious at Sasuke, who he recognized. He also recognized Kakashi. He was one of the many people who actually paid some attention to him when he was still in Konoha. But he had suspected that Kakashi would have paid more attention to him if Nawaki didn't interrupt them so many times, or at times Tsunade. But the one who infuriated him the most was Nawaki. Oh, how he wanted to kill him right then and there. But that kind of revenge wouldn't be satisfying. No, he would make them suffer the deepest level of hell of this world first. Throughout the night the sounds of trees falling onto the ground could be heard many times. Some were wondering what was making the sound, and one person knew who was making the sounds. That person who knew was Kakashi. He had snuck out during the night to spy on Madara. Imagine his surprise when he saw Madara cloaked in a lightning armor that reminded him of his signature technique but only black in color. What surprised him even more was the Sharingan he saw Madara had. This confused Kakashi even more. If he really is Naruto-kun, why does he have the Sharingan? Madara didn't discover that Kakashi was spying on him due to his rage clouding his senses. Otherwise he would have sensed that at least someone was spying on him. The next day, one grumpy and in an incredibly foul mood Uchiha Madara walked through the streets of the despairing town. His bad mood was only increased by the shabby and run-down condition of the place. Suddenly felt a presence behind him. "Soifan-san, what is it you need?" Madara asked the kunoichi, who suddenly appeared behind him and started to walk with him. "Madara-san, I was wondering what course of action you are going to take to save Shizuka-sama and Tokiwa-senpai." Soifan asked Madara as she was quite desperate to save her fellow comrades. "First we need to gather information. It would not do well to charge in recklessly," Madara said calmly. "Soifan-san, what do you currently know about Gato?" "Not much. From what I gathered, he wants to control Nami no Kuni and make it his base of operation. So far, with the will of the citizen broken, it has been going smoothly, but when Tazuna-san started build the bridge, it became a symbol of hope. The bridge, however, also will make Wave prosperous again and make Gato lose his hold on the control, and that is something he will not allow." Gato hired a missing nin, specifically Momochi Zabuza, to kill the bridge builder. Soifan informed Madara of what she currently knew of Gato. Madara seemed to think about it for a few seconds before talking again. "It is safe to assume that Gato didn't only hire Zabuza, the demon of the mist, to kill Gato. For all we know, he could have hired more as assassins or as bodyguards. Zabuza is known as an A-rank missing, one of the 7 swordsmen of the Hidden Mist, and a master of the silent killing technique. So the best course of action would be to wait for Zabuza and whatever missing nin Gato hired to attack the bridge first before we attack Gato's base. Speaking of which, we have to find where his base is first," Madara said, explaining his thought on the best course of action. Soifan nodded her head in agreement. "But why not attack the base while Zabuza is still there?" Madara said before Soifan could say anything. And in response Soifan sputtered, But why? You just said how dangerous Zabuza is as an opponent. Why attack while he was still there?" Soifan questioned loudly. "Simple, I want to fight Zabuza." Soifan could only stare at Madara due to the illogical and absurdity of his statement. "Are you crazy?" Soifan shouted at Madara in anger. "What about Shizuka-sama and Tokiwa-senpai?" Madara just sighed. "It's fine as long as they don't get hurt, right? Besides, with the element of surprise we would have the upper hand," the blonde Sharingan user said simply. Soifan just stared at him, unable to refute his statement. "Fine, Madara-san, but if Shizuka-sama or Tokiwa-senpai gets hurt, I will kill you," she spat dangerously at Madara before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Madara didn't even stop to acknowledge she was gone, even though some people were staring at him due to Soifan's earlier outburst. In truth, Madara really wanted to fight Zabuza to test his skills, as most of his opponents were nameless Jonins or a group of Chunins. In a sense, Zabuza was someone he was going to use to measure his strength against. Madara wasn't arrogant enough to believe that just because he had Madara's power he would be invincible. He needed to test his skills, as normal Chunins and Jonins weren't enough. He needed to test himself against some of the best. Zabuza so happened to one of the best. While thinking about locating Gato's hidden headquarters, Madara continues to walk through town looking for clues. He had another reason why he wanted to attack Zabuza before he strikes. It was quickly finished objective so he could leave Nami no Kuni and not see his brother again for a long time, until he was ready at least. His goal was to ruin the life of his half-brother Nawaki and Senju Tsunade. In order to achieve that, he must get stronger first. Then take away all they hold dear and give them despair. Madara knew that if he was to do that he would eventually clash with Konoha as a whole. That was why he must get stronger. Suddenly he found himself surrounded by a group of thugs. Each one of them was holding some sort of weapon, be it pipes, knives, spears, or swords. "Hey kid! We heard that you were looking for a boss," shouted one of the thugs. Something about attacking him, he continued to shout in a mocking voice. "You should know that he is the most powerful and richest man in the world. Apparently some people don't know that, and they need to be made an example out of. Starting with you. Isn't that right?" the thugs said, and finished with a question to the other thugs. In response they shouted in agreement and started to charge too. Naruto sighed as he watched the idiots come at him. Seriously, how does Gato expect common thugs to protect and rule the country? If it wasn't for the balance of power that would be tipped, Other ninja villages would have already conquered Nami no Kuni the first instance they heard he had overturned it. "Stop moving and stay still so I can hit you," shouted one of the thugs that surrounded Madara and tried to hit him in turns but was dodged every single time. In response, Madara just introduced his fist to the thug's face and knocked him out. The other members gaped at how easily the blonde 12-year-old incapacitated one of them. They charged forward this time with more vigor. But it was all for naught as they weren't trained as a shinobi was and were all knocked at by Madara. Soon there a mountain of bodies in the middle of the street made up of those thugs pile up on one another with Madara sitting on top of them. But don't worry, they aren't dead, just merely unconscious. People stared at the young blonde as he jumped off the mountain of bodies. Suddenly he disappeared in a spark of lightning. Sigh, maybe I overdid it. Madara thought as he stared down upon the street where once stood from the rooftop of a nearby building. Suddenly he caught something moving in the corner of his eye. If I remember correctly, he was one of the thugs. It seems like he ran away while I was occupied. Oh well, anyways, this convenient. I can follow him back to Gato's base. Madara thought to himself as he began to discreetly follow the thug. Madara followed the thug out of town and into a forest full of giant trees. As Madara followed the unknowing guide, the light from the sun diminished as they moved deeper into the core of the forest. The thug every once a while would look around to see if anyone was following him. But as he went deeper into the forest he forewent the cautiousness. Madara narrowed his eyes as he saw Gato's base. It was in the shape of two cones connected to each other by their base, and held up connected to the surrounding trees. I found the base. That was easier than I expected. Madara thought to himself. Suddenly a loud grumbling sound was heard. Maybe I should eat something before I attack. Madara thought to himself, glad that no one was nearby and saw that embarrassing moment. He jumped through the trees intent on eating something before he attacked the base. After Madara had eaten his dinner, which was a roasted rabbit he had found and killed in the forest near Tazana's house, he decided he was going to attack the base tomorrow. It was near nighttime after all, and a Sharingan worker better when it was lighter, in other words when he could see more. Madara jumped onto a tree branch and sat down with his back leaning on the tree. He planned to sleep there for the night. HMPF, why don't you just give up right now, second best? A arrogant voice reached Madara's ears. What do you mean, Sasuke team? It's obviously that I'm the better ninja. The only reason you got Rookie of the Year was because the test was flawed. An equally arrogant tone said. Madara turned his head to the left to see the Sasuke and Nawaki tree walking. There were marks on the trees made by the kunai in each of their hands. Judging by their battered bodies, they've been training how to tree walking for a long time too. Madara thought as he watched them. Madara silently observed them, as he watched them train. Truth be told, he was a bit disappointed by their skill level. He expected his half-brother to be on higher level and at least able to water walk, not still training to tree walk. His mother was supposed to be Tsunade, and no matter how much Madara loathed to admit it, she was a genius and probably had the best chakra control that ever existed. Although Tsunade probably had tried to teach Nawaki chakra control at an early age, but Nawaki probably was lazy and complained it was too much work and didn't want to do it. Tsunade, much like the doting mother, probably gave in to Nawaki's complaints. Still, if Nawaki had actually trained at an earlier age when his chakra wasn't so massive, he would have probably have excellent above-average chakra control. Madara knew his half-brother well. He was a brilliant learner, make no mistake about that, but he was unmotivated and lazy, which was why he was as weak as he was now. Madara suspected that if he actually trained hard, he would have been a Chunin, possibly Jonin by now. Sasuke, on the other hand, was also a brilliant learner with a lot of potential, not on the genius level Itachi is, but with time could surpass him. Madara suspected the reason Sasuke didn't know the tree walking yet was because no one was able to teach it to him due to the fact that all his clan members were dead, and so he had to train himself. What do you think? A voice suddenly asked Madara from nearby. Madara didn't even turn his head as he knew Sharingan no Kakashi was on a branch near him and had been there for a while since Madara started to watch the two Konoha Junins. As much as I loathe to admit it, their progress at tree walking is abnormal. If it was a regular Junon, it might have taken them days or weeks to make the same progress they're currently making. Kakashi inwardly smiled at the praise for some reason. Years ago he had wished to train Naruto too, but his hopes had been dashed when Naruto ran away. He knew Naruto would have been the perfect student. He knew he was a genius, unlike his mother and father who couldn't tell but hid it. But despite all this, he was quite unpredictable. But he had to settle with Nawaki, and he wasn't saying that Nawaki was a bad student, but he thought Nawaki was just too straightforward and boring like Sasuke. However, Namikaze Senju Nawaki is lazy. I suspect that the only reason he is trying so hard right now is because of his rival, the last Uchiha. Kakashi this time inwardly frowned, although he couldn't refute that statement. From what he's seen of the older Namikaze brother, He was a genius in his opinion, but as the blonde before him said, Nawaki was lazy. He could learn most jutsu and concept easily, but if it took too much effort he would give up almost immediately unless something motivated him, say a rival. Speaking of blondes, I guess you would know a lot of things about him as he is your older brother, right, Naruto-kun? Kakashi asked, not 100% that the young man before him was who he had called him. He was only 50% sure. Half-brother Madara said, not refuting the statement but neither confirming it. What? Kakashi exclaimed. I said Nawaki is my half-brother, Madara said calmly. But it was not the same for Kakashi. His mind was in overdrive with thoughts. What does he mean? Is he saying that he isn't Naruto? And what does it mean by half-brother? I know Naruto's mother was Tsunade-sama, but this person before me claims that he isn't the full brother of Nawaki. Does this mean Sensei cheated on Tsunade-sama? Maybe Tsunade-sama cheated? No, it's not possible. The person before me looks too much like Sensei and Naruto. But Naruto is Nawaki's full-blooded brother, right? I have to know. Madara suddenly stood up and disappeared in a raiden, Shushin successfully dodging Kakashi's unasked question before he could ask it. Madara, on the other hand, was frantically trying to calm himself down. He hadn't planned to tell Kakashi so much. Kakashi was one of the people who he felt actually cared for him despite their few interactions. But he knew where Kakashi's loyalties lied, and he couldn't afford to stay at Nami no Kuni any longer than he needed. He had just hoped that Kakashi would think him as an illegitimate child of the Yondaime, although he could already be considered that. After all, his father was only officially married to the slug Sannin and not his mother. With that thought, Madara produced 3 shadow clones to keep a lookout before he went to sleep. The next morning one of his clones woke him up. Madara then dispelled his clone and sat down near the fire and picked up the cooked rabbit his clone had made for him. Eating the rabbit, Madara thought about his future. He needed allies, that was a given. But he needed allies that were strong enough to take on a hidden village. But the problem was gathering them and making them join his cause. He didn't need revenge-obsessed allies either. No, he needed allies that would follow him and not backstab him given the chance. That was the reason he had decided to save the princess of the Nadeshiko village after all. He shook his head as he finished his rabbit. He decided he still had time, he would gather allies along his travels, and he was after all only 12 and nowhere near his full potential. With his breakfast done, Madara began to tree jump to Gato's base. When he arrived there he noticed that there wasn't as many guards as he saw yesterday. Madara's first thought of action was to launch one of his JMD, Jutsu of Mass Destruction XD, but that might harm the Nadeshiko Kunoikis, so he refrained from doing that. Instead he did a henge on himself to look like one of the thugs he saw yesterday. He began walking towards the entrance of the base, but a guard tried to stop him. Not really in the mood to act and take things slowly, Madara activated his Sharingan and hypnotized the guard into letting him through. Madara maneuvered through the corridors of the base, but there's surprisingly few guards. He sensed something amiss, but he decided to check every corner of the base first. He checked the dungeons, nearly every room, and finally he came into what seemed like Gato's office but still couldn't find his targets. The door to the office opened and 2 Ronins came in. What caught his eyes was the person they had over their shoulder. It was Tsunami, daughter of the bridge builder. The other one had Inari, the grandson. Who are you? The one without any clothes on his chest demanded in a rude tone. Madara, who knew that the 2 Ronin were no real threat to him, decided to dispel the genjutsu he casted onto himself. Wah! The 2 Ronins cried out in unison. Madara's Sharingan spun madly and soon both the Ronin's eyes glazed over and dropped what Madara assumed to be future hostages. Tell me where the Kunoikis from the Nadeshiko village are? Madara demanded of the 2 hypnotized men. The one with the beanie answered. Gato-sama has gone with some hired thugs to the bridge. He probably brought the 2 kunoichi with him. Why? Gato-sama decided that Zabuza and his apprentice wasn't worth the money and decided to get rid of the shinobis and Tezuna with the thugs. Then where is he right now? Gato-sama wanted to meet with us on his private yacht, so he is probably on the yacht with his hired hands too. I see, Madara said. Without any mercy Madara drew his chokudo and sliced their heads off. After that he made the clone hand seal and summoned 1 shadow clone. The clone nodded towards the original and took the Tsunami and Inari and escaped the base with the original following him. As soon as they got out of the forest they split up with the original heading Gato and the clone bringing the former hostages to safety. Madara ran along the edge of the lake through town. Once he saw that the road would diverge from the lake edge he jumped off the road and used his water walking skills to run towards the mist, which had the highest chance of Gato being there. Madara slowed his run into a slow walk as he walked through the mist, hoping to use his ears to locate the yacht. Madara kept walking through as he strained his ears locating the boat. He cursed himself as he realized how much he relied on his eyes. It was a weakness, his reliance on his eyes was a weakness. Luckily for him the thugs on Gato's boat were obnoxiously loud and he located them easily as he followed their voices. Madara briefly wondered where Soifun was before dismissing it as he sped through a couple of hand seals. Genjutsu, Temple of Nirvana Jutsu. White feathers started to fall upon the area and within seconds the ruckus from the boat had quieted down until a morbid silence settled into the area. Madara waited a bit longer to make sure the thugs were caught in his genjutsu before he jumped onto boat. As he had expected, the thugs were all on the unconsciousness and asleep. He maneuvered his way through the thug carefully as he didn't want to wake them up. He found Shizuka and Tokiwa tied up in one of the bottom storage rooms of Gato's yacht. They were unconscious either from his genjutsu or from being knocked by Gato's thug through physical means. He noticed that they were a bit thin but otherwise unharmed, and that their clothes didn't seem to be damaged, so it was mostly likely that they weren't assaulted or raped. Madara bent down to untie the ropes around them. Midway his instincts suddenly went into a frenzy. He quickly jumped up. And not too soon either, because a yellow glowing blade passed under him just as he did so. Madara flipped in midair and used his chakra to stick his feet on the ceiling. Looking at the spot of where he once stood, he saw a dark green-haired man with the headband for an Omega clear shinobi. "Who are you?" Madara asked with his Sharingan blazing. "Shouldn't I be the one asking that question, intruder-kun?" the man said with mocking tone. "But you don't have to, after all you're quite infamous. Uchiha Madara." At this Madara narrowed his eyes. "Don't look at me this way, after all you're the only blonde-haired Sharingan user." Madara studied the Ame shinobi closely, or more specifically the glowing yellow sword in his hand. "You're Rakusho Aoi," Madara said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Aoi widened his eyes in surprise. How Aoi began to but was cut off by Madara. "How did I know?" Madara said, saying Aoi's question before he even finished asking. "It was simple," Madara said, pointing to Aoi's hand. "That sword, the sword of the Thunder God, it was well known that it was stolen." I never thought that my name was that infamous," Aoi said with an arrogant tone, one that suggested self-importance. "Don't let it get to your head, the only reason you're even this infamous is all because of the weapon you have, not your skill. In fact, I don't even think your page in the bingo said anything about you, just the sword," Madara said before Aoi could say any more. Madara smirked as he saw Aoi visibly anger. "Shut up," he yelled as made a slash with the sword of Raijin at Madara. Madara quickly charged a Chidori in his right hand and then drew his Chokudo to block Aoi's sword. Aoi smirked as his blade connected. But his smirk was soon wiped off and replaced with a confused look. "Why?" he asked as he landed back on the ground. "Why what?" Madara said, obviously enjoying Aoi's confusion. "Why aren't you being electrocuted? The sword of Raijin was supposed to cut through your sword and electrocute you." Aoi shouted out. "Because you're weak," Madara said with a bland tone. "You rely on the sword too much." True, the sword is a very powerful tool, but all tools rely on the shinobi themselves. If the shinobi is weak, then the tool is weak. Aoi's face twisted in anger as he charged at Madara, who had jumped down and landed onto the floor. Clong. Clack. Clong. The sound of swords clashing could be heard. Aoi's breathing soon became labored and his moves sloppy as frustration overtook him. "Why?" he yelled. "I'm supposed to be invincible, unbeatable, and yet you're easily defending against my attacks. As I told you before, you're weak. You rely too much on that sword," Madara said, to which it increased Aoi's anger. "I'm not weak," he yelled at Madara with a crazy glint in his eyes, charged at him. Madara steadied himself and prepared to deflect Aoi's attack. Despite what Madara said about Aoi being weak, he still had a hard time deflecting his attacks. It wasn't that it was lie when Madara said he was weak, it was true. It was just the fact that Madara was weaker because of his preteen body and has to devote much of his attention to defend himself. Aoi was weak, but Madara was even weaker. At least in physical capabilities. The only reason he could keep up was due to the Sharingan's predicative abilities. That was why he had been riling Aoi up to make his moves sloppier, so that he can activate Chidori Shiru. DCH. He thought to himself as Aoi charged again. As Aoi closed in on Madara, Madara prepared himself, but suddenly Aoi just ran past him. Madara looked around to see Aoi charging at Shizuka and Tokiwa. Madara ran at him and stood in front of the two hostages as Aoi prepared to swing his sword down. Madara tried to raise his sword in time, was useless, and he was cut down. "Ah ha ha ha. Who said I was weak, huh? I am strong, invincible, unbeatable. You're just a brat who doesn't understand anything," Aoi said with a crazed voice as he stomped on Madara's body that was leaking blood. "Caw." Aoi stopped as he heard a crow's call. He looked around trying to locate it. Then he looked at his feet and saw a single crow on Madara's bleeding body. Suddenly there were more sounds and crows started to erupt from Madara's body. Aoi covered his eyes as the crows flew at him. DCHSHHHHHHHH. A sickening sound of a sword piercing flesh could be heard. Aoi looked down to see Madara's chokudo coming out of his chest. He turned his head to see Madara behind him holding the chokudo that pierced his chest. How? Aoi asked in his dying voice. It was simple. Have you forgotten what the Uchiha clan's Kekkei Genkai was famous for? Madara said in a lecturing tone to Aoi. Aoi's eyes widened as he understood and said one word. Genjutsu, and with that Rokusho Aoi died. Clack. 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 The sound of the sword that was once in Aoi's hand was heard as it made contact with the floor. Madara pulled his chokudo out of Aoi's body and swung to get rid of the blood before sheathing. Putting his hand into a familiar cross seal. Gauge no bunshine. Two clones puffed into existence. They each went to one of the kunoikis and untied the ropes binding them and carried them out of the boat. Madara, who stayed behind, bent down, picked up the sword of Regina and placed into his pouch. Then he walked out of the room and looked for Gato. He found Gato sleeping with his face on the desk in his private office on the yacht. Grabbing the Gato by his tie, Madara had to stop himself from laughing out at the fact that Gato was a freaking midget. He dragged Gato through the ship, and once he reached the deck, he threw Gato into the water. Unsurprisingly, he woke up and started to call for help. Unfortunately for him, his hired hand were still under Madara's genjutsu. Gato sighed in relief as he felt someone pull him up, but it soon turned to anger as he found it out was by pulling his necktie. What do you think, yo? Gato stopped mid-sentence as he stared into the Madara's Sharingan eyes. And he was further silenced as he felt Madara's killing intent focused onto him. Gato, tell me, are you afraid to die? Gato could only nod as he pissed his pants in fear. Then tell me, Gato, where do you keep your money, and I'll let you live. Gato's eyes widen in horror. Wait, you want money, right? I'll pay any amount you want, just let me live. Gato frantically said, hoping to make some deal with his could-be killer. No, I want all your money, Gato. Madara simply said as his eyes bored into Gato's eyes. Soon Gato's eyes glazed over, and he calmly told Madara where he could find all his money and his bank account numbers and the such. Madara then walked towards the bridge where his clones were supposed to be waiting for him. Slowly he used chakra to walk up the pillars of the bridge before walking onto the road of the bridge. When he arrived, he found the mist to be cleared and everyone staring at him. Soifun was also there, but she looked a bit battered, but otherwise she was fine. She was currently next to his clones tending to her fellow kunoikis who had just woken up. Zabuza had kunais sticking out of both his arms and was on the ground, presumably dead. His Kyuubi Karabocho laid on the ground not far from him. There was a body next his feet. Must be his accomplice. Madara thought to himself. He had a pretty face, but other than that there was one other thing that stood out. It was the gaping hole in his chest. Kakashi-san's work, no doubt. Dazuna, the bridge builder, was also there staring at him. Along with Kakashi, who had his Sharingan uncovered and looked quite exhausted. The Junins were also there. The only one who wasn't injured seemed to be the kunoichi of the team. Probably didn't do anything. Madara thought. Nawaki was there too, only he looked a bit more feral than usual. Madara could see the Kyuubi's chakra inside of Chakra Network, but it was quickly disappearing. Other than a few scratched or dirt on him, he looked fine, but Sasuke had a wide look in his eyes. His body was jammed with senbons, reminding Madara of a pincushion. Madara noted that Sasuke had his Sharingan activated, but it wasn't fully matured. But that was to be expected. It already considered prodigal even have it at Sasuke's age. Madara slowly walked over to Soifun, purposely ignoring the other people. How are they? Madara asked Soifun. They are a bit malnourished but otherwise fine. I thank you on the behalf of the village, Soifun said as she bowed to Madara in gratitude. The two other kunoichi tried to move, or was it talk? But they seemed to be unable to, as they could only barely move themselves. Shizuka-sama. Tokiwa-senpai. You shouldn't move too much, the drug may be taken out of your body, but it is still too weak to do anything, Soifun cried out in concern. The older of the two kunoichi that Madara rescued complied to Soifun's concern, but the younger refused to give in to her weak body. Madara looked at her closely now. He saw that she had a fair face with brilliant green eyes and long hair in Heim style. He could in few years she would be quite a beauty. TT than KYYU. Shizuka managed to croak out. Madara only nodded in acceptance. Should I lend you my clones to help you carry them? Madara asked Soifun. Soifun said. That would be appreciated, but where will you go? I don't know, probably someplace really far away from Konoha at the moment, Madara said. Just as he said that he heard Sasuke yell. Why do you have the Sharingan? The group turned their head towards the Konohanins who were looking at them, some with their weapons drawn. You should go, Madara said. Bibu. Madara silenced Soifun's protest with a glare. Just go. We'll meet again someday, Madara said. Soifun hesitated for a moment but complied. Madara's clone picked up one of the former hostages each and jumped off the bridge with Soifun following. After that Madara began to calmly walk towards them and then stopped a few meters away from them. It's obvious isn't I'm an Uchiha, Madara said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Impossible. I haven't seen you before at the clan compound. And there has never been an Uchiha that was blonde in the Uchiha clan's history, Sasuke shouted in defiance. And yet the evidence is right before. Madara replied calmly. Sasuke gritted his teeth. He knew that he couldn't say the evidence was false. 2 days ago he had seen the blonde's eyes, and they were normal. Now they had Sharingans in them, proof that it was natural and not a transplant. Even so, why aren't you a shinobi of Konoha then? Kakashi asked with narrowed eyes, prepared to attack if necessary. Madara didn't acknowledge the question, instead he threw a knocked-out Gato who was still in his hands. Some of the people widened their eyes in recognition of him. GG Gato. Tazuna managed to stutter out. Hey, who are you? Nawaki for the first time spoke. Madara didn't acknowledge him either. Do what you want with him, he said. The shinobi got into their battle stance as Madara approached. They looked in confusion as he suddenly stopped. He bent down and picked up Kyuubi Karabocho, which was at his feet. He then took out a scroll and sealed it into it before putting it back into his pouch at his left hip. Then he turned around and walked towards the edge of the bridge. Wait Naruto, Kakashi yelled. Come back to Konoha with us. As Kakashi said that, Sasuke's and Sakura's eyes widened in surprise. But Nawaki narrowed his eyes in hate. Madara ignored that too. When he reached the edge of the bridge he turned around to face them. Madara, Uchiha Madara, that is my name. With that said he fell backwards and off the bridge. The Konoha teams and Tazuna's eyes widened in surprise. But suddenly they saw the blonde boy who called Uchiha Madara on top of a giant crow flying off. Chapter 3, Uchiha Madara's, subject to change. Namikaze Minato used to pride himself in the fact that he had a perfect family. Emphasis on had. Because of his duties as the Hokage of Konoha he was rarely home. At first he thought it didn't affect anything much at all. Then his son Naruto ran away from home, from Konoha, from him. That action caused him to reflect on himself about what he knew about his family. He realized that he didn't know about his family as much as he should. For one, he hardly knew Naruto at all. He knew Naruto used to be boisterous, hot-headed, and mischievous, much like Kushina. Thinking about Kushina, it made his heart hurt even after all these years with Tsunade. It was one of the reasons he tried to drown himself in paperwork, to help him take his mind off of her. Naruto had reminded him so much of her, that he tried to avoid as much as possible. Perhaps he thought to himself that was why Naruto ran away, because he didn't show his love to him at all. He had accidentally gotten Tsunade pregnant during one of his drunken nights moping about breaking up with Kushina. Minato thought that little mistake he made will forever bury itself in his past, remaining hidden till the end of time. Oh, how wrong he was. Tsunade had become the incarnation of a tornado as she practically torn through everything on her way towards Konoha. She had practically screamed to the world that he had gotten her pregnant. There was no way he could get out of this. He had at first thought to come clean and tell the truth to everyone, but Kushina stopped him, telling him how it would ruin his reputation. When he had asked her what he was supposed to do, she suggested that he make his relationship with Tsunade official, while taking her as his mistress to help repopulate the Uzumaki and Senju clans as they were once one great clan. It was a large sacrifice on her part to which he agreed. When he had announced it to Konoha, they were ecstatic and for a time everything went well. Only the part about his relationship with Tsunade though. Although it seemed Kushina and Tsunade were at odds for a while, but everything resolved itself soon enough, or at least he thought he did. Then Uchiha Madara attacked Konoha. That damn bastard, as Minato called him, had unsealed the Kyuubi from Kushina and unleashed it on Konoha. Having no other choice, Minato had planned to sacrifice himself to seal the Kyuubi into Naruto, who was born on that night, but it seemed that the Sun Daime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen-sama, had knocked him out when he heard about his plan. It seemed that the Sun Daime had sealed the Kyuubi into Nawaki, due to Tsunade reasoning that since Nawaki was a Senju he should be able to handle the Kyuubi better. They were lucky, he thought, since Nawaki was also born that day. Years passed, and Naruto and Nawaki were proclaimed twins, with Nawaki being the older one and the hero for containing the Kyuubi. It wasn't that hard to pull either due to their likeliness. He decided for Naruto to be announced as a twin instead as another son only from Kushina, as it would destroy his reputation, as Kushina warned him. He continued to immerse himself in paperwork, not noticing the inner turmoil of his family. Then Naruto ran away. When he asked his wife and son why Naruto had ran away, they just looked seemingly in guilt. He blamed himself. He should have realized that Tsunade would have loved her son more, Not that he doubted that Tsunade didn't love Naruto too. It was just that she loved Nawaki more as he was her own flesh and blood. Thinking back, it was probably his own damn fault that Naruto ran away, as he was the only who didn't show love Naruto. And from what did he about Naruto from this? Nothing. Hell, Kakashi knew more about Naruto than him, and he only visited about once a month. He resolved to bring Naruto back in any way possible and make it up to him. That was his vow. He had started to spend more time at home after that, trying to actually know his family. It made Tsunade and Nawaki very happy, it seemed. He had taken upon himself to train Nawaki too, when previously he would have just let Kakashi, Jiraiya, or Tsunade to train him. Throughout the years he never stopped looking for Naruto. He even asked his sensei to keep an eye out for him too. They didn't find much about him. But he finally found a clue about Naruto. Given that it surprised him a little. Okay, I lied, it surprised the hell out of him. New questions had come out once he read Kakashi's report about the mission to Nami no Kuni. Sharingan, why would Naruto have the Sharingan? Does Naruto know the truth about his mother? Those two questions were the most troubling to him. Although he did have a theory, he had always wondered why Naruto also had a seal on his stomach. Now he knew, as absurd as it seemed, Sandaime-sama sealed Uchiha Madara into Naruto. Why had he not seen it sooner? Minato just sighed as he looked at the new entry, or rather the newly edited Konoha Bingo Book entry. Name, Uchiha Madara/Namikaze Naruto. Suspected. Alias, Crimson-Eyed God. Rank, Low A rank to Low S rank. Kekkei Genkai, Sharingan. Family, Namikaze Minato/Yondaime Hokage. Suspected. Notable jutsus, Chidori. Information, a shinobi of unknown origins that appeared about 2 years, where he immediately made a name for himself due to his strength and mastery of the Uchiha clan's Kekkei Genkai, the Sharingan. However, it is suspected that he is from Konoha and is of some way related to the Yondaime Hokage due to uncanny resemblance. Beware, underestimation of him is not wise, as he is a powerful shinobi whose most recent achievement consists of killing Rakushuawi and single-handedly crushing Gato's business empire. Reward, 75 million Ryo alive, dead 0 Ryo. Naruto, where are you? Minato asked aloud, before sighing again and preparing for the Chunin exam. With Madara. Eku. Madara sneezed aloud and wondered if anyone was talking about him behind his back. Thinking it to be just a coincidence, he resumed what he was doing before. Okay, let's try this again. Rasengan, Madara shouted as he formed the ball of pure chakra and slammed it into a training dummy. Predictably, the dummy was torn to bits. Damn, not enough. Madara thought to himself as he surveyed the results of his jutsu. It's true I can form Rasengan in less than 3 seconds, but the power isn't enough. At this stage my Rasengan can only be considered a B-rank jutsu. Uchiha-sama. A voice called out to Madara. In response, Madara turned to see a random Kirinin of about age 30 standing a few feet away from him. Yes? Madara asked the Kiri shinobi. In truth, the term rebel Kirinin would be a more appropriate label for the nin in front of him. Terumi-sama sent me to let you know that she would like to discuss something with you. The nin said again. Madara nodded to let him know that he heard him before dusting off his clothes and walking towards where Terumi-mae would be waiting for him. The nin followed silently after Madara, but standing a couple feet away from him. As for why Madara would know Terumi-mae, the leader of the Kari rebellion that started the civil war, was quite simple. 1 month ago Madara sought them out to make a deal with them. The deal itself was quite simple in itself. Madara would lend them a safe haven along with the necessary funds to combat the corrupt Yondaime Mizukage, in exchange for help to rebuild the once feared Uchiha. The funds were from the money that Gato so willingly donated to Madara. In truth, Madara could probably rebuild the hidden village with the fund itself, but even if he did, it wouldn't be so simple. The reason was because Uzu no Kuni, land of whirlpools, no longer existed since its destruction and was now officially a part of Mizu no Kuni. That is where helping the rebels came in. If the rebels succeeded and became the rulers of the new Mizu no Kuni, they would grant his request of the new hidden village along with the former country where it once resided, and they would become protectors of the new Uchiha until it could stand on its own legs once again. Not to mention that it would probably lead to an alliance with one of the 5 great hidden villages, and there would be some shinobi who would want to stay and become part of the new Uchiha. If you were wondering why Madara was rebuilding Uchiha, the reason was quite pure and innocent, in contrast to Madara's more dark and devious plans. It was to honor his mother, Kushina Uzumaki. That was it. As for where they currently were, they were at the safe haven, which so happens to be the ruins of Uchiha, although ruins would no longer be a suitable adjective for it. because ever since the rebels migrated there and made it their main base of operations they have begun to rebuild the former glorious village. One of the main building that was built was the what would consider the Cage Tower if it was one of the 5 great hidden villages. It was where the mission were handed out, where the leader lives and resides in, and where the most important choices are decided by the leader, in other words the heart of the Uchiha Gakuer. The building was a simple large tower made of the stones or some other kind of building material. On the outside it may seem cold, but in reality the inside was quite comfortably furnished. The guards bowed to Madara as he walked through the main entrance to the where Terumi May currently resided. He nodded his head in acknowledgement of their actions but otherwise ignored them. Without knocking, Madara walked through the doors into May's office on the second topmost floor, with his office being on the topmost floor. Not that he used it much as the past month he was either training or experimenting with the blood of a Makuten user, specifically Tenzo's blood. Terumi May was a beautiful kunoichi even by Madara's standard. She had long auburn hair that was almost twice as long as Madara's own hair and was quite gifted by Kami, if you know what I mean. But behind that beautiful face was an S-rank kunoichi with mastery over 2 Kekkei Genkais, namely Yotan, Lave Release, and Futen, Boil Release. May dismissed the Kirinin that was following Madara as she gave a pleasant smile to Madara as he sat down. "What did you want to see me for?" Madara asked. "Madara-san, I was calling you here to inform you of some shipments of the weapons and the recruiting of new members," May said as she pulled out some papers to show to Madara. But before she could show them to him Madara started to speak. "May-san, you know that I don't care what you do as long as you win the civil war, well as long as you don't betray me or the fact that you might be running low on funds. So let's get on to the main topic as you usually don't call me for these things either. What do you want?" May in response smiled pleasantly again. "Madara-san, although we, the Kirigakura Rebellion Force, are grateful for your help, I just can't help but wonder why you would want to rebuild Uchiha Gakuer. I'm not wondering why you want to have your own village, but why must it be Uchiha Gakuer or be even named that? As far as I know you are an Uchiha and not an Uzumaki. So please tell me Madara-san, why do you want Uchiha Gakuer to be rebuilt?" Madara just looked at her while deep in thought. On one hand, if he didn't tell her the alliance might sour and that might lead to devastating results in the newborn alliance. On the other hand, if he did his secret might go out and that would lead to unpleasant consequences too. For example, Konoha might know of his heritage and would either try to get him back or outright attempt to kill him. Not to mention that his father's reputation would plummet once he knew of his two-timing relationship, on second thought, consequences be damned. Karma is going to be a bitch, namikaze Minato. Madara thought as he let out an evil smirk and chuckle. That day he explained his heritage to Terumi May. Of course he left out some details and emphasized on the darker details such as his father's two-timing actions and the abuse he suffered at home. Of course when May asked why he had the Sharingan, he said that he refused to tell her and that telling her of his heritage was already too much to ask for. Though he did tell her that it was one of his dreams to rebuild Uchiha Gakuer in honor of his mother. Damn, I got worked up more than I expected to. Madara thought to himself as he recalled his occasional outbursts during his explanation to May earlier. Indeed, compared to his usual calm and aloof attitude, it was unbecoming of him. With a sigh, Madara resumed him training only to find out he could properly concentrate on his Rasengan with it reminding too much of his family. With a sigh, Madara decided to forego today's training and go to sleep early. 1.5 months later. "When I come back I hope to hear good news, May-san," Madara said as jumped onto his giant crow summoning. "Of course Madara-san, with your support, we should be able to win within 1 year now," May said as she waved goodbye to Madara. "Terumi-sama, are you sure it's okay to trust him?" "Ow," a former hunter nin of the corrupted Kirigakura whispered to May as he watched Madara's crow fly off into the distance. "It's fine now, as long as we honor our end of the deal we have nothing to fear," May said in response as she walked back towards her office without following. Madara was currently on his crow in order to take him across the water between Hi-no-Kuni and his promised Uzu-no-Kuni. Since there were many whirlpools surrounding the island country, most conventional means of transportation were useless, hence the use of crow summoning to fly over it. As to why Madara was going to Hi-no-Kuni, or more specifically Konoha Gakuer, it was quite simple. He was going there to watch the Chunin exams. Madara had heard that the Hokage's prodigious son was able to make it to the 3rd stage of the exam along with other genins his age, most of which were clan heirs. Needless to say, Madara was going to watch the Chunin selection exam to see if his prodigious brother had improved or not. Over the past month and a half, Madara dedicated most of his time to training his newly gained Makuten abilities. Due to the fact that the blood he had injected himself was of weaker user of the Makuten Kekkei Genkai, it was much weaker than it could. To compensate this, Madara had to find more creative ways to make it more efficient. Other than that, he had trained his body to help compensate for the low muscle mass he had due to his young age, along with taijutsu with help from the rebel nins. He made progress shortening the time of Chidori Shiru and created more variations of it. His fire chakra training was still going badly, both due to the fact that he doesn't really know how to train it efficiently and that none of the rebel could train him in it. The only one qualified was Mei, but she was far too busy to train him. Amigakure was a shinobi village that closed its borders to everyone since the reign of Hanzo the Salamander, but now there was a new ruler that continued that policy even after the Salamander's reign. His name was Pain, a shinobi blessed with the power of the Rinnegan. Along with Konan, the angel of Ame, they ruled the hidden village of Rain. Pain in his deva path was currently sitting on the tongue of one of the faces that adorned the central tower of Amigakure. Suddenly a whooshing sound could be heard behind him. Without looking back, Pain already knew who it was. "Pain, I found a potential new member for Akatsuki." The man wearing an orange swirl mask with one hole showing his right eye, known as Toby, said. "Who? Uchiha Madara? Are you fucking with me? Weren't you the one who said not attract too much attention?" Pain exclaimed in a clearly irritated voice. Toby held out his hand, waving it as if surrendering. No. I'm talking about the Uchiha Madara that recently showed up a year ago. Isn't he only 13 at most? Do you really think he has what it takes to join us?" Pain asked while he stood back up and walked inwards to who know which room in the tower, with Toby following him. "Itachi joined only at age 13 too, didn't he? Besides, from what I know, he is the son of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina, the former jinchuuriki of the Kyuubi." Toby informed his leader. "Wait, isn't he the son of Senju Tsunade?" Pain questioned, as he could have sworn he just said that Madara. "To make things simpler, I will call Naruto Madara, Toby, and the first Madara won't even be brought up till later. Had Uzumaki blood just like him." Toby chuckled in amusement. "No, he's the son of Kushina. I don't know how, but somehow the Hokage managed to impregnate both the Senju and the Uzumaki." "Then how does he have the Sharingan?" Pain asked in a monotone voice, but if you knew him well enough you could tell there was a bit of a curiosity in his voice. He of course had heard of this Uchiha Madara that appeared a year ago and had confronted Toby about, with Toby convincing him that the new Madara was only borrowing the name. "I don't know, but there is one thing about him that makes him a prime candidate to become an Akatsuki member," Toby said to pique Pain's curiosity. And indeed it did. Toby, seeing that he had Pain's attention, continued to speak. "He hates the Hokage and the Senju, believing them to be the cause of his mother's death." Pain seemed to think about before saying, "Test him first. If he meets the standards, I'll allow him in." "I plan to," Toby said. "Not that you had a choice regarding whether he joined or not," Toby thought to himself secretly before using his space-time migration jutsu to disappear. In an unknown forest in Hinokuni, Madara was currently tree-jumping his way towards Konoha, until he suddenly sensed a presence next to him. Acting on instinct, Madara unsheathed and slashed towards his right. Mat," said a man wearing an orange spiral mask in a childlike voice. He wore dark green scarf and black shirt and pant with linked armor pieces on his arms near his shoulder and his legs near his waist. "Who are you?" Madara asked in all seriousness. Toby in response exclaimed, "I am the ultimate most awesome super ninja of Akatsuki." Toby, with a very childlike voice while at the same time striking a pose. "Just I?" Madara asked. Quite frankly, he was pissed at Toby. I mean, who the hell acts like unless they wanted to piss almost everyone they see? Charging a Chidori in his hand, Madara swiped horizontally in front of him. About 15 shuriken-shaped lightning chakra was launched as Madara swiped his hand, all of them chirping like hundreds of birds and the size of Fuuma shurikens. "Chidori shuriken!" "Wah!" Toby shouted in mock terror, and he frantically dodged them. In his effort to dodge, Toby lost his balance and fell onto his butt. "No!" he shouted in terror as he saw one last Chidori shuriken coming at him and would soon bisect him if he did not move. Unfortunately, he couldn't move quick enough. Madara's eyes widened in surprise as the Chidori shuriken just go through him as if his body was an illusion. "Wah! How close!" Toby could have died. "You know children shouldn't play with dangerous things," Toby said in a chiding manner as he pointed his right index finger at Madara. Madara narrowed his eyes. "How did he do that? Am I in a genjutsu?" He tried to dispel any genjutsu that was casted on him, but as far as could tell he wasn't influenced by any. Madara activated his Sharingan to see if the Toby in front of him was a genjutsu, but he could tell Toby was real and was not a genjutsu. Strange, how did he do that? I need to test him some more. Madara placed the palm of each of his hand onto the summoning seal on the bottom of his wrist and waited to see if Toby would do anything. Suddenly Madara sprung into action as he saw Toby try to move. Without mercy, without warning, without stopping, Madara unsealed hundreds of shurikens and flung them all at Tony one shuriken at a time. At first Toby dodged all of his attacks in his unique manner, but soon to Madara's expert eyes he could see that within the next second Toby wouldn't be able to dodge his continued barrage of shurikens. To his surprise, Tony instead of using any jutsu or defensive maneuver suddenly just stood still. Madara soon found out why, as the shurikens just passed harmlessly through Toby. I can still see his chakra there, so he's still there and didn't leave a genjutsu or a clone. But how is he doing this? Is it a space-time jutsu? Whatever it is, it won't be able to last forever, and that is when I'm going to strike. With that thought, Madara continued to throw shurikens at Toby non-stop, and gave chase when Toby tried to move out of his shuriken's line of fire. 5 minutes passed. That's when Toby suddenly changed tactics. He pulled out a sickle and knocked out most of the shurikens off course while dodging those that he could. About 5 minutes, huh? Madara said aloud, talking to no one in particular as he stopped his barrage of sharp and pointy things. Phew. Madara-san, that's dangerous. Didn't I tell you children shouldn't play with dangerous things? Toby said, still in a chiding manner. That jutsu, is it a space-time jutsu? Madara asked Toby. Nope, Toby said excitedly without hesitation. It's known as the Toby style. By now Madara's left eye was twitching madly due to Toby's antics. Madara's hand went through about 21 and then he slammed his hand onto the tree trunk that the branch he was standing on came out of. Makuten, Senbenzakura Kagyoshi, vibrant display of 1,000 cherry blossoms. I couldn't resist giving Naruto that one, since that Bankai is my favorite. Zanpakuto and cherry blossoms could be considered a Makuten technique in my opinion. Branches and branches of cherry trees emerged from the tree Madara was standing, all of them in full bloom. Almost the whole tree was pink due to the many pink petals that were coming out of the tree. Those pink petals began to shine as they detached themselves from the branches they used to be on. Madara stretched his right hand out with his palm out towards Toby before making a fist. Behind his mask, Toby's eyes widened as those cherry blossoms raced towards his, shredding everything that was in their way. He could tell they were glowing due to the chakra that was inside. Not wasting a minute, he made himself intangible, and none too soon because the place where he was standing was quite practically shredded to bits. Madara smirked. This jutsu was the result of his efforts in Makuten training. Through trial and error he found out that the effects of his jutsu was frankly extremely weak. His Makuten Haijutsu, Nativity of a World of Trees, barely produced 10 trees, and his Makuten, Advent of a World of Flowering Trees pollen, were extremely weak. All in all, it left much to be desired. That was why he took a different approach. As a result of this, he created Makuten, Senbenzakura Kagyoshi, vibrant display of 1,000 cherry blossoms. First he made the cherry trees. Then he charged the petals with his chakra to strengthen them, and then he charged them with lightning chakra to make them hard, durable, and they became sharp because the edges of the petal were already thin, making tiny blades for him. Finally he directed the petal blades to where he desired with his hands. Thanks to his chakra being in there, he could move them as he liked. It wasn't strong, but it was still overwhelming. However, being a relatively newly created jutsu, there were many weaknesses. 1. He needed to use an already existing tree to make the cherry tree branches. 2. It took about 30 seconds for the technique to finish, all the while the user can't move. 30 seconds in which his opponent could kill him. He was already experimenting on removing those weaknesses by using a sort of catalyst of some sorts and only creating the cherry blossoms and petal instead of the branches and tree trunks too. 3. A good Futon jutsu could probably blow away those petals away from the target and possibility back at him. 4. His control over the technique perfect, yet so the attack may seem slow, but that would be solved with more usage of the jutsu. Madara was sure there were more weaknesses, for example possibly burning those petals to oblivion with a Katen jutsu. Wow. Madara-san sure likes sharp and pointy things, huh? Madara's eyes widened as he heard the voice behind him, and charged a Chidori in his left and slashed at Toby while turning around. The attack failed as Toby grabbed his wrist, effectively stopping the Chidori. That was when Madara noticed the Sharingan when he looked through the single eye hole of Toby's mask. Madara's eyes widened in confusion, wondering who the person in front of him was. Is he an Uchiha? But I know all of them were massacred by Itachi-san. Perhaps a transplanted Sharingan? Who are you? Madara asked for second time since meeting Toby. I told you my name is Toby, Toby said, introducing himself only this time in his normal and serious demeanor, letting go of Madara's hand after the Chidori fizzled out. But my real name is Uchiha Madara. Madara just stared at him before he started laughing. Stop lying, you aren't Uchiha Madara, he said after he regained his breath after laughing. If I'm not Uchiha Madara, who is then? You? Toby asked, wondering if Madara really knew he wasn't who he said he was, or was just laughing at the thought of him claiming to be one of the most feared ninja of all time. I'm not the first, I'm second. First? Second? Toby asked, confusion evident in his voice. Correct, the first Madara already died, although he didn't die after his last battle with Senju Hashirama. Madara informed Toby. I've never claimed to be the original, but I'll tell you why I call myself the Nidaime Uchiha Madara. After he said that his three-domed Sharingan eyes started to morph and change. Those eyes, Toby gasped out in clear surprise, recognizing the pattern that Madara's Sharingan changed into. Iron Mangekyo Sharingan, Amaterasu. Without warning, the black flames of the Mangekyo Sharingan engulfed Toby's chest. Seeing that his attack hits its mark, Madara turned off his Sharingan and turned around, intending to continue to go to Konoha. That was close! Exclamation mark in surprise. Madara activated his EMS and glared at the apparent unharmed form of Toby. Who exactly are you? Toby didn't seem to be fazed by Madara glares as he continued to speak as if there wasn't three dangerous and enormously powerful jutsu that could be used against at any time. It doesn't matter who I am at this point, but what I am offering you. Offering? Yes, to join Akatsuki. What is Akatsuki? We are a mercenary organization comprised of 10 S-ranked shinobis. Our goal is world domination. I'm not interested in world domination. You don't have to be, but if you join us we'll help you destroy the leaf. My goal isn't to destroy the leaf. Yes it is. Toby asserted, even to Madara's denial. Madara glared in denial again, challenging Madara's claim. Do you really think the Hokage wouldn't try to stop you in your revenge against his wife and son? Madara asked rhetorically, intentionally implying that Madara wasn't the Hokage's son. No, of course not. You would need to go against the Hokage for your revenge, but if you go against the Hokage you go against Konoha too. Madara was staring at him with a cold mask on his face. Face it, you need allies, and we the Akatsuki are the only ally that can help you. Toby turned his back and began to use his space-time migration jutsu as he began to leave. If you are interested, go to Amiga Core. Toby voiced said as it echoed throughout the forest. Chapter 3, Life-Changing Decisions Part 1. Namikaze Senju Nawaki vs Tenten. Begin. Shouted Shiranui Genma shouted as he shunshined to a safe place to watch the very first match of the third round of the Chunin selection exam. Nawaki had changed his clothing after the second part of the Chunin exam, not that it was all that important to know. He now wore dark green shinobi shirt and pants with blue sandals. His headband was still on his forehead and his hair was even longer than ever. He now wore a white coat that barely reached past his knees, and it also had a red flame designs that licked the edge of his coat, much like his father's coat, only his didn't, of Konoha no Kyosenko, Konoha's yellow flash, written on it. Instead it has the Senju clan symbol on it. On his back was a sheathed average-length katana with a rectangular crossguard with smooth rounded edges and a dark blue hilt. Nawaki Senju grinned in anticipation. He had trained a whole month for this with his sensei. He originally wanted his father to train him, but he was too busy since the Chunin exams was a very diplomatic event. But Nawaki didn't mind. I mean, who would complain when you're being trained by the Toad Sage Jiraiya? Sure, he may be a little perverted. Okay, I take that back, he's the biggest pervert to ever exist. That better? No matter his quirks, he is still considered a legendary shinobi for a reason. Besides, it wasn't like his father didn't help him. The katana on his back was proof of that. It was a special katana made by the Uzumaki clan. The sword was created by the Uzumaki clan's feared Fuinjutsu, sealing techniques, it also one of the reasons that they were destroyed. Unfortunately, the method to create such swords was also destroyed along with the village. His father said that it once belonged to a very close friend of his. Though when he said close friend, Nawaki could see a tender and loving gaze, one stronger than the one he gave his mother when he mentioned this friend. It made Nawaki very confused, but he decided not to pursue since he had something more important at the moment, which was training for the Chunin exam. Nawaki stopped reminiscing as he adjusted himself into his fighting as he faced his opponent Tenten. He didn't know much about her besides the fact that likes to throw very and pointy weapons. Nawaki didn't get to see much of her techniques due to the fact that she fought Sakura and that their levels were too far apart. Though she did change her wardrobe, her new attire now consists of a long-sleeved white blouse with a high collar and red fastener and edges paired with similarly colored, puffy pants that look like a hakama, with the exposed parts of her legs near the waist covered in bandage. She also had a large scroll like the one his sensei Jiraiya carried. Tenten moved first. In a flash she had taken out a storage scroll and unwrapped in one quick motion. Poof, 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 poof. Poof. Tenten unsealed an unaccountable number of weapons ranging from simple kunais and shurikens to tantos and gamas, sickles, and a repetition of smooth movement launched them at Nawaki. Nawaki, seeing this, drew two kunais, one in each hand, and started to deflect all the weapons coming at him. He didn't move, instead he just stayed there deflecting Tenten's projectiles, waiting for his chance to attack when she ran out of them. Yeah. Sorry, but there's a problem with your plan, Nawaki. She doesn't run out of projectiles. Nawaki soon found out about that fact after the first 5 minutes of the endless barrage of extremely sharp and pointy things, but he couldn't do a thing about it. The weapons were coming too fast for him to move right or left or to even make hand seals. All he could do was wait for an opening to escape. Suddenly Nawaki saw one thrown weapon that stood out. It should have stood out too because it was a broadsword that was at least as long as Nawaki was tall and at least 1.5 feet wide. Nawaki gritted his teeth and used both kunais to block the blade, seeing that he couldn't move to the right or the left due to the numerous weapons on both his side. Surprisingly, there was only one projectile directly aimed at him, and that was the broadsword. Clang! Due to the force behind it, both of Nawaki's hands were pushed upwards into the air with his kunais knocked out of his hand. Nawaki's eyes widened at the surprising force behind the sword but soon returned to its normal size as he calmed himself and looked back at Tenten. However, she wasn't there, much to his surprise for the umpteenth time today. Then he saw a brown blur on the bottom of his eye. He looked down to see Tenten crouching low to the ground with a broadsword almost as large as the one he just deflected. "Oh yeah, I forgot something." It was in mid-swing. Nawaki tried to curse but was stopped as he tried to dodge. But unfortunately or fortunately, depending on a person's point of view, he tripped over his own foot and fell backwards where the sword Tenten swung just missed by the barest millimeters. A tch sound escaped Tenten's lips as she saw her strike miss, but despite missing, Tenten brought the sword up and swung it down at Nawaki. Nawaki, seeing this, rolled out of the way and away from Tenten as he used his hands to lift his body up and flipped a few meters away from Tenten. Once he landed from the series of flips he performed, he grabbed the hilt of his katana, showing that he was taking her seriously. Nawaki knew that the only reason his opponent hadn't won was through his dumb luck. He was sure Tenten knew it too. It angered him that he was so humiliated in such a huge arena full of people. He gritted his teeth as he took a few calming breaths. "That bitch. How dare she? I'm going to calm down, Namikaze Senju Nawaki. Don't go charging in blind rage. Remember what Jiraiya-sensei said. Stop. Take a few calming breaths and think clearly." Nawaki thought in his head as he let go of the handle of his katana. Tenten unfurled the large scroll she carried somewhat and unsealed 6 other swords, each uniquely shaped and just as large as the one she had in her hand. Each one of them was summoned with parts of their blade tips in the ground, making them stand upright. With that done, she rewrapped her scroll using a Fuinjutsu mechanism that was placed onto the large scroll to make it easier to rewrap. With that done, she picked up another sword, so she had 2 broadswords, one in each hand, and took a fighting stance as she faced Nawaki. Nawaki didn't run towards her, as he found out from his sensei that each of Guy's students was quite competent at taijutsu and had warned him not to engage them in close combat unless he had an advantage. Currently he didn't. That was why he had to fix that. Nawaki flashed through a series of hand seals and sucked his breath as he prepared to unleash his jutsu. Suten, Suijin Heki, water release, water encampment wall. A large amount of water was expelled from Nawaki's mouth. As he was using this technique, Nawaki saw that once the water reached Tenten, she jumped and used the water walking technique to stay afloat. Nawaki kept expelling large amounts of water from his mouth as he saw Tenten narrow her eyes at him in confusion. Indeed, any shinobi would be confused as to what Nawaki was doing, because in their eyes Nawaki was just wasting chakra on a jutsu that was even doing anything to harm his opponent. When Nawaki finally stopped, he too was water walking, although his breathing was slightly louder than before. "Damn, it took almost half of my chakra. Why must the stadium be so big? But I did it." Nawaki thought to himself as he looked at his handiwork. The whole stadium was covered in about a 2 foot deep of water, courtesy of his jutsu. Nawaki had a good reason for this. You see, when he was training with Jiraiya, he was tested for his elemental affinity, which so happened to be water. Unfortunately, many of the Suten jutsus needed a large body of water to be used. Luckily, Nawaki had made a plan to help him on that aspect. And this was his plan. Not only would it help him against Tenten, but the water would remain and could used in his later matches. Tenten charged at Nawaki, finally running out of patience to sit back and keep observing. Nawaki, seeing that Tenten wanted to engage him in close combat, immediately began to run through hand seals once again. Mizubunshin no Jutsu, water clone technique. 5 clones were formed from the water surrounding Nawaki. Once they were done, each and every one of them, including the original, unsheathed their katana and ran towards the charging Tenten. Clank! Tenten swung the sword in her right arm at the clone nearest to, only to be blocked by that clone's katana. She swung the one in her left only for it intercepted by another clone's katana who had gotten close when Tenten was concentrating on the first clone. "I got you now," Nawaki shouted as he and the other 3 clones jumped into the air with their katanas over their head, poised to strike at Tenten. To Nawaki's surprise and horror, the 2 swords started to glow red as they cut through the 2 katanas that were blocking her sword's way, although melt through would be a more accurate term. Tenten's sword didn't stop. Instead, they made their way into the 2 clones, forcing both of them to disperse into the water that they were made from. A smirk could clearly be seen on Tenten's face as she ready to stance and waited for the clones to come down. This is bad. Nawaki thought in panic. I can't dodge while I'm in the air, this is bad. I can only hope that she attacks the clones instead of me. Hurrah! Tenten shouted as she swung her swords with all her might at the 3 clones and 1 original that were in the air above her. PSH, PSH, PSH. Clank. 3 of the water clones were dispersed despite their efforts of blocking Tenten's sword with their katana. Nawaki, however, raised his katana in time to block Tenten's sword, and thankfully his katana was at full strength instead of the 1/10 strength that all of his water clones' strength were at, including their katanas. That didn't mean he wasn't affected by the attack completely. He had been thrown back from the force of Tenten's swing. Fortunately, due to his training from Jiraiya, Nawaki was used to flying back from strong blows, and so he flipped in mid-air onto the surface of the water unharmed. Damn it! Nawaki softly muttered to himself at how hard his first opponent was. Nawaki hadn't expected to be this hard until the 2nd or 3rd round. Nawaki didn't have any more time to think due to the fact that Tenten had once again charged at him with her sword, ready to slash at him once more. Nawaki gritted his teeth at the situation. First, everything he did was unsuccessful against Tenten. Second, he didn't have time to do any hand seals for any ninjutsu. Third, her taijutsu or kenjutsu was currently better than him. Fourth, she was freaking nearing ready to slice him in half. Right. Rankle the seasoned heavens. Najibana, Nawaki shouted as he started to twirl his katana with both hands like some sort of lance. To Tenten's surprise, the sword in Nawaki's hand began to glow yellow and lengthen. I have a bad feeling about this. Tenten thought to herself. I better end this before he use whatever that weapon is. With that thought, Tenten increased her speed and swung both her swords downwards at Nawaki, only for it to be blocked by what appeared to be a silver lance-like weapon that was a cross between a trident and a Chinese halberd. It had a blue horsetail tassel on the end of the trident part, with the other end shaped into corkscrew or drill shape. With a surprising amount of strength, Nawaki pushed Tenten back, and swung Najibana upwards. The attack in itself wasn't anything special except for the fact that the water underneath Nawaki seemed to obey his weapon and made a strong wave which crashed Tenten into the arena wall that was 10 meters away. Gah! Came Tenten's painful cry as she spat out a small amount of blood. Before she could fully recover, she saw another large wave coming at her. Damn! Tenten shouted as she threw away the sword in her left hand before using that left hand to grip onto the sword's handle. Yeah! Tenten shouted as she slammed the sword through the water and into the ground. Then, to everyone's surprise, a large amount of visible chakra could be seen as it flowed into the Tenten's sword. But the effects of that was even more surprising, as the blade seemed to enlarge itself a great deal, enough to make a 5-meter tall and 3-meter long blade made of rock. The wave harmlessly crashed into the barrier Tenten made, with Tenten herself safely above the ground holding onto the handle. Just as quickly as the large sword of stone appeared, it had disappeared into the broadsword made of steel that it once was. Tenten could be seen panting heavily as was in a kneeling position. But that wasn't all. Half of her body was in the water, signifying that she either chose not to water walk anymore or the fact that she couldn't, which in this case was the latter. Nawaki, seeing his chance, charged at Tenten while she was still down. Proctor, I forfeit, Tenten shouted, making Nawaki halt in surprise just a few feet away from her. Genma nodded in acknowledgement and shouted. Winner Namikaze Senju Nawaki, why? Nawaki asked, confusion evident in his voice. In case you haven't noticed, Senju, that last technique I did used up a large amount of chakra. So much that I can longer even water walk. If I continued to fight, I would have lost. Tenten explained. Up in the stands, the Jonin senseis had watched the match with fascination. A conversation began as Nawaki left the arena, with Tenten following after she had sealed away her weapons. What was that? Sakura nearly shouted the question she had wanted asked but couldn't, as she was too absorbed into the match. That was chakra flow, Kakashi answered the girl who just so happened to sit next to where he was standing. Chakra flow? Sakura said with a questioning tone. Chakra flow is Kakashi didn't have a chance to explain as Sarutobi Asuma cut him off. I'll explain since I actually used that technique. Basically, you insert elemental chakra into something for it to gain a property of that element. However, there is a condition: you have to have a natural affinity to the element to actually use it. For example, that girl Tenten used fire chakra to superheat her sword, allowing for it to melt through anything it touches, although it really depends on the material it tries to melt. Few Jonins even uses the technique, much less Genins. Asuma explained to Kakashi's Jinan, but this is really a surprise, Gai-san, for your Jinan to have 2 natural elemental affinities. Kurenai spoke after letting Asuma finish his explanation. You're wrong, Kurenai-san, Gai said to Kurenai at her statement. What do you mean? Kurenai asked in confusion. The other Jonins who were listening on to the conversation were also curious to what Gai said. Tenten doesn't just have a natural fire and earth affinity, she also has water, wind, and lightning too. Guy said with a proud smile onto his face, much to the shock of the other jonins. Then why did she only use fire and earth? Asked Asuma. That is because those are the only two elements that she was able to train in the past month after she found out, Guy said. Amazing to have all 5 affinities and to be able to train 2 affinities to that extent and learn chakra flow, Kakashi said this time. Her potential may even be higher than Nawaki's or Sasuke's. Guy looked proud. Yes, her flames of youth will truly shine brightly, Guy said enthusiastically. The other jonins could only shake their head at his antics. But the question I'm most curious about is Namikaze Senju's sword. What is it? Kurenai asked, with the other jonins agreeing with her. Kakashi spoke this time. I believe I can answer. That sword is a relic of the Uzumaki clan. Uzumaki clan? Sakura said in a questioning tone. She has listened in interest at the conversation beforehand but didn't say anything due to the fact that she had known bits of what the teachers were discussing, but she didn't know anything about the Uzumaki clan. Sakura, the Uzumaki clan was a clan of feared Fuinjutsu users. They were so feared that 2 of the 5 great hidden villages banded together and eliminated them in the Second Great Shinobi War, Kakashi said, explaining some basic facts of the clan first. A byproduct of the clan's Fuinjutsu were swords. The swords all were unique and had special properties such as the one Nawaki has, but it is not usable to everyone. There are certain conditions that have to be met. In Nawaki's case, you need a high water affinity, which Nawaki obviously has. How did your student get that sword? Asuma asked. Sensei gave it to him. Kakashi simply said. Back onto the arena, Narashikamaru's and Hyuga Neji's fight had already began while the jonins were talking about Tenten and Nawaki's sword. Troublesome. Shikamaru muttered under his breath as he tried to capture Neji's shadow with his Kage main no jutsu, shadow imitation technique. It was quite hard, when the Hyuga's shadow was light and murky on the ground due to the water. Hell, it was even harder with the Hyuga water walking/running towards him while dodging any attempt of him trying to capture his shadow. Did I mention Shikamaru can't water walk yet? Yeah, he was screwed. Proctor, I forfeit, Shikamaru shouted, seeing that he was horribly outmatched by the Hyuga prodigy. Genma could only sigh as he shouted, winner Hyuga Neji. Due to the fact this was the second match in a row that someone forfeited, added by the fact this one wasn't as entertaining as the first, it displeased the crowd. Genma waited for about 5 minutes before he began announcing again. Would Sabaku no Garanduch? Genma was interrupted as a Konoha jonin appeared next to him in a shunshine and started to whisper in his ear. Giving the unnamed jonin a nod, he disappeared in a poof of smoke. Genma cleared his throat as he prepared to make an announcement. Ahem, due to some circumstances, the match between Sabaku no Gara and Uchiha Sasuke will be moved back in the last place, he announced in a particularly loud voice. Now would Kankuro of the Sand and Aburame Shino please make their way to the field? Then to the crowd's annoyance, Kankuro forfeited, and by default Shino forcing Genma to move on to the next match, which was Samui vs Damari. Up in the audience seats Madara sat. He finally appeared for the first time in this chapter, among them. He wore a black cape with a hood that he was currently using to hide his face. He had been there ever since the third part of the Chunin selection exam started, observing his brother. But he was quite surprised by Tenten's appearance. He may have been Tenten's friend when he was Naruto, but that didn't mean he would lie to himself. He knew Tenten was above average, but to Madara at the time he thought she would only be a slightly above jonin at most. Seeing Tenten's abilities in the first fight had changed his opinion about the girl. Nawaki on the other hand wasn't that much of a surprise. Madara knew Nawaki was lazy, but he also knew he had a stubborn pride. And in a contest with such a large audience he would not allow himself to look weak. He had improved and became much stronger than he was last seen in Nami no Kuni, Land of Wave. Although his katana Najibano was a surprise, Madara briefly wondered where Nawaki could have possibly attained it. But he quickly threw that question out of his head. Tsunade probably gave it to Nawaki. The Senjus and Uzumakas were a clan of distant relatives after all. It wouldn't be weird for the Uzumakas to give the Senjus something as a show of good faith after all. In Madara's opinion, the only reason Nawaki won was because of Najibana. The fight between the Hyuga and Nara was slightly disappointing to Madara. As the Hyuga seriously outmatched the Nara, it wasn't really a match. He didn't have anything to comment about Gaara or Sasuke because their fight was delayed. And now the second Sand sibling Kankuro had forfeited. Seriously, what was wrong with this year's tournament? 3 times in a row people had forfeited and now a match was delayed. But finally the fourth match was something more like a regular fight. Tamari, one of the Kazekage's children, was a Fuuten user. Madara was impressed. Her usage of Fuuten was near Jonin level despite just being a Jonin. But her opponent Samui was no slouch either. Samui had set up a small field made of lightning chakra that alerted her to the incoming invisible attacks. So far they were at a stalemate. Samui couldn't use any long-range Raiten jutsus or they would shot down by Tamari's Fuuten jutsus, and for the same reason she couldn't get close. Tamari wouldn't get near because she was a long-range fighter and against a Kumo shinobi it would disadvantageous due to their rumored kenjutsu skills as evident by the Tando Samui held. She could only launch long-range Fuuten attacks whether it be jutsu or wind chakra manipulation, which her opponent would be forced to dodge. But finally the tides changed in Samui's favor. Tamari, due to her constant use of lethal jutsus, had used up all of her available chakra. Samui however only used a little amount of chakra to maintain her lightning field and was far better off despite the few cuts she had on her. Without warning, Samui charged at Tamari and used a Raiten jutsu to electrocute Tamari until she fainted. Winner Samui of Kumo. Tamari was taken by the medics to get her injuries treated while Samui returned to the contestant box waiting for the next match. Okay, things basically followed the way it did in canon up to the point the Temple of Nirvana technique was used. I didn't write this because it would just be a useless repeat of what you would already know. Madara's eyes widened in surprise as he saw the Nihon Shoyu no Jutsu, Temple of Nirvana technique, activating. Why is such a large-scale genjutsu being used, right? Madara thought. What should I do? Perhaps pretend to succumb to the jutsu? Yeah, that's the safest plan right now. With that thought, Madara bent forward as if sleeping in a sitting position. However, under his hood his eyes were angled in such a position that he could look straight without anyone finding out he was awake. Madara had even slowed down his breathing as adding a step to fake his sleep because a skilled shinobi could tell if someone was really asleep or not just by their breathing. That was because when a person sleeps his breathing slows, which also commonly makes them breath faster when they first awake. The Suna, sand, and Ado, sound, nins are attacking the Konoha, leaf, nins. Is this an invasion? But why, wait a second, I remember that Sunagakuer, village hidden in the sand, was in trouble because the Wind Daimyo was sending more missions to Konohagakure. Madara stopped his train of thought as he almost reacted to a kunai that flew over his and impaled an Ado-nin. Could it be that the Kazekage wants to show their daimyo Sunagakure's strength by taking down Konohagakure? But even then he should know it's foolish, especially against Konoha's Kyosenko, Leaf's Yellow Flash. But yet why is he still attacking? Unless he has a powerful ally to help. But who? Iwagakure, village hidden in the rock? Maybe, but it's not likely as they have first experience at the Hokage's technique and strength. No, it must someone who has nothing to lose by using Sunagakure against Konohagakure and someone who has a large hatred towards. Furthermore, this person has to be smart enough to raise a hidden village as Otogakure is most likely that person's village and knows Konohagakure's structure well. It will also most likely be a nuke nin of Konoha. The only person who I could think of right now is Hiruko, from Naruto Shippuden 3rd movie, and Orochimaru. Hiruko is only interested in bloodlines, so the person is mostly likely Orochimaru. Madara concluded, although he wasn't 100% sure. It could just have been someone else, but to him it was most likely Orochimaru. Madara was brought out of his thoughts as he was forced to dodge an attack from an Anbu. Leave it to the Anbus to be able to tell I was faking sleep, Madara thought, cursing the Anbu in his head. Madara unsheathed his Chokudo and slashed at the Anbu who had charged at him but was forced to block Madara's Chokudo with his katana. Madara used this moment to activate his Sharingan and gaze into the Anbu's eyes. The Anbu had not expected to the Sharingan, so he was caught off guard seeing the crimson eyes. To this, Madara easily paralyzed the Anbu with a genjutsu, but before the Anbu could break out of it, Madara pierced his heart with his Chokudo. After sheathing his Chokudo, wiping the blood off first, or rather swinging it and flinging the blood first, Madara knew that he couldn't pretend to be asleep with a dead Anbu on his feet, jumped off and onto the rooftop. When he made it to the top, his attention was directed towards the large Kekai barrier, with a poisonous purple color towards his right. With his Sharingan enhanced version, he saw his father flash in front of what he knew to be the Shodaime Hokage, Senju Hashirama, and place some sort of seal onto him. To Madara's surprise, Senju Hashirama's skin seemed to peel away as it lost its color. Soon what was in front of his father was a corpse of some kind with papier-mâché. Edo Tensei, Impure World Resurrection. Madara thought as he recognized the after effects of the jutsu from what he read in his mindscape. There seems to be another corpse just like the one that used to be the Shodaime. Who is it? The Nidaime Hokage, Senju Tobirama? From what I know of Orochimaru, he is the sick kind of bastard that would use Konoha's former Hokages to attack it. Madara, for the first time in a long time, inexplicably felt fear grip his heart as Orochimaru kicked his father a few meters away. He saw Orochimaru walk towards Minato at a leisurely pace with the Kusanagi in hand. Orochimaru seemed to be talking as if mocking Minato, but at that moment Madara felt his body move by itself. Activating Chidori Shell, Madara broke through the barrier unaffected by its less than pleasant effect as his jutsu protected him. Just in time too, as he blocked the sword that was coming down onto his father with his Chokudo. "And Naruto?" he heard his father say in surprise and disbelief. Orochimaru too was surprise as evident on his face, as it was one of the few times the Sannin truly showed surprise. But all that didn't matter to Madara at the moment. All he could do was stare at his hands, which was holding the Chokudo that blocked Orochimaru's Kusanagi, in surprise. Why? Why did my body just move by itself? Chapter 4 Life-Changing Decisions Part 2 Kukaku. Those eyes, what wonderful eyes! Orochimaru commented after he jumped back away from Madara as soon as he saw the lightning chakra course through his Kusanagi. Naruto, is that you? Minato asked with a slight tenderness in his voice as he looked at Madara's Chidori covered back. Madara however sheathed his Chokudo as he let Chidori dissipate, opting to observe the snake Sannin instead of his father. Minato, who was sprawled on the ground, forced his body despite his protesting body. Slowly he staggered towards Madara and placed his hand on his shoulder, or at least tried to, before Madara suddenly turned around and nailed him in the gut with a kick, which flung him a few feet back. "Yondaime Hokage, you should leave before you get caught in the crossfire," Madara said to his father in the professional tone almost every ninja uses. "Wait, Naruto, you aren't strong enough. At least let me help you," Minato yelled to his son despite just being kicked by him. He was sure now, that the blonde Sharingan wielder was his son now that he saw his face. He desperately wanted to help even if he knew he would probably die. "Hokage, look at yourself. You're in no condition to fight. All you would be is a dead weight that'd get me killed." Madara toned Minato with an even colder tone as he tried to suppress the warmth that suddenly sprouted in his chest as he heard Minato's words. "Maybe he really does care about me." "Kukaku. I never thought that the Crimson-Eyed God would be such a little brat, Madara-kun," Orochimaru said as he gained the two blondes' attention. "I don't mean to be imposing on this little reunion of some sorts, but I'm going to have to kill you now, Minato-kun." He finished, not sounding as if he cared at all. "Orochimaru. You," Minato said as he tried to argue against the snake Sannin. Truly, fighting against the two former Hokages and a Sannin hadn't been good for his health. Even a Genin could tell Minato was on his last legs as he coughed some blood out. Without warning, Orochimaru charged it towards his right and then made a sharp turn towards Minato. Minato, who saw, tried to move but found his body frozen due to the damage he received. Minato saw his son's back again as he once again blocked the sword that was meant for him, only with a regular kunai this time. "Go, you're a hindrance, you useless bastard," Madara growled out as he was forced to save his father again. "Damn! Why does my body keep moving without my consent? I'm supposed to hate him," Madara thought to himself, although a little voice already told him the answer. He just refused to believe it. Minato, seeing that his son was right, reluctantly used his Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God, to flash away into the hospital, but before saying some last words to his son. "Naruto, don't, I'll come for you and then we can all be a happy family again with your mother and Nawaki again." Although Minato didn't see it, that was the worst thing to say at that moment, as Madara's face showed his intense rage at being called a family with the Tsunade and Nawaki. "So you're Uchiha Madara, or rather Namikaze Senju Naruto, am I right?" Orochimaru taunted as he had already pieced together the information he just gathered. "I'm Uchiha Madara," Madara shouted back as he made a single Tora, Tiger, Seal, Katen, Gokaku no Jutsu, Fire Release, Great Fireball Technique. A large fireball was spewed from Madara's mouth as it came towards Orochimaru. Orochimaru was surprised at Madara's mastery over the technique, as he only used a single seal for the technique. It almost caused him to get hit by the attack. Almost. Orochimaru used his inhumane speed to move to dodge the fireball before the bottom part of his legs turned to a large snake tail as he slithered towards Madara. Quite quickly, I might add. Madara unsheathed his Chokudo as he readied himself for Orochimaru's incoming assault. Clang, 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 clang. The sound of sword clashing against another sword rang out as Madara and Orochimaru had a battle of Kenjutsu, sword techniques. Strange. Orochimaru should be stronger and faster than this. Why am I able to keep up with him? That's it. He must still be tired after fighting the Hokage. Madara released as he saw how tired and haggard Orochimaru's body was with his Sharingan. With that thought in mind, Madara's attacks became fiercer and stronger. Orochimaru frowned inwardly as he felt himself being pushed back. There. Madara saw the opening in Orochimaru's defense and pulled his Chokudo before he pushed forward again for a stab. Pshhhhh. The sound of Madara's Chokudo entering Orochimaru's flesh could be heard as he pierced his heart. Orochimaru's body collapsed onto the ground as his body lost all of its strength. Is this really it? Somehow this feels too easy. A Chidori sparked up in Madara's right hand and coursed through his Chokudo and electrified Orochimaru. Madara stared at the now charred corpse before he pulled his Chokudo out and began to walk off. Madara stopped in front of the purple Kekai Jutsu, barrier technique, as he observed it. On the outside he saw many Anbus looking at him and what was inside suspiciously. Well, who wouldn't when you had kicked their Hokage? And on the four corners he saw 4 people who he assumed created the barrier still there. Strange, shouldn't they be escaping when I killed Orochimaru? A sudden thought reached Madara's head as he whirled around as quickly as possible, only to see Orochimaru's head coming towards him with his mouth open and fangs clearly seen. Damn it, I don't have to dodge this. Damn. I have no other choice. Madara thought, clearly upset that he had to use the Iron Mangekyo Sharingan, Eternal Pinwheel Copy I, twice within a week. Orochimaru showed his surprise as his fangs bit into what seemed to be a transparent ribcage that suddenly appeared to protect Madara. Well, he tried to bite into it, but it only resulted in him breaking his fangs. He looked on curious, studying it, as he had never seen such a technique before. Orochimaru had originally wanted to place the cursed seal of heavens on Madara when his guard was lowered so that he may become one of his next bodies. He didn't time to observe the technique anymore as his eyes suddenly met Madara's. Imagine his surprise when he saw the look of Madara's Sharingan. Mangekyo Sharingan. Unfortunately for the Sannin, he didn't any more time to observe, as that was when Madara precisely used one of the single most devastating fire jutsus. Amaterasu. Madara stared at the screaming head of the snake Sannin as the flames consumed him. He briefly wondered how a human's neck could elongate that much as Orochimaru's. It's because Orochimaru is no longer something that can be called human. Madara told himself. He would have turned his attention back to the Kekai, but given how Orochimaru already survived a Chidori-enhanced pierce to the heart, he wasn't taking any chances. And with good reason too, as the snake Sannin's mouth opened widely and a body emerged from it. Madara could only look in disgust as Orochimaru discarded his old skin that was still being burned by his black flames. However, Orochimaru wasn't entirely okay either, as he could be seen visibly panting. That technique must have taken quite some chakra, Madara thought to himself as he saw Orochimaru's chakra diminished after using that shedding technique with his Sharingan. Madara-kun, I have to wonder. How did you get the Sharingan? Orochimaru asked, very interested, as from what he knew the lost son of the Namikaze Minato, Namikaze Senju Naruto, wasn't an Uchiha by blood. Or was he? Orochimaru, did you know you're a disgusting piece of shit? Madara said in a venomous tone as he insulted Orochimaru. Orochimaru's left eye twitched. He hadn't been insulted like that in a long time. Before he could say anything again, he was forced to move as a black flames burst out of nowhere behind him. No doubt it would have burst out on him had he not moved. Damn. I can't take any more damage like that. I'm nearly out of chakra from fighting the Yondaime Hokage. It's too bad. I would have liked to take Madara with me. Orochimaru thought sadly, more like disappointed, to himself. Sakan. Jirobo. Kitamaru. Tuya. Let's go. Orochimaru commanded his subordinates. Immediately, like the quick and efficient underlings of Orochimaru tended to do, the Kekai dissipated and they ran off with Orochimaru. Madara briefly entertained the idea of going after Orochimaru but quickly shot down the idea. On second thought, Madara thought to himself as he saw the Anbu coming to surround him. After all, if he was going to run away, why not chase after Orochimaru while he was at it? Madara reverted his EMS back into its normal matured Sharingan form as he closed his eyes. A few moments later he opened them again, and at the same time Chidori Sheru activated. Not wasting a moment as the Anbus were getting quite close to him, he began to chase after Orochimaru. Madara roof-hopped as fast as he can and kicked any shinobi that was in his way regardless of who he was. Once he was far enough, Madara stopped his Chidori Sheru because despite its smaller drain than a regular Chidori, it would still run his reserves dry. Besides, he had already used Amaterasu and a partial manifestation Susanoo, namely its ribcage. I have only about 35% of my chakra left. It would be unwise to continue chasing Orochimaru now. Madara thought to himself as he just jumped through Konoha's gates, ignoring all the shinobi that were fighting near there. Instead he weaved himself through the battles so that he could slip out unseen. Madara made a sigh as he looked at his hands. Why? Why did I save him? Am I too soft? No, that's not possible. I have prepared myself for over 5 years. Yet why did I save him? Madara thought, frustrated to himself. Then he remembered the mysterious masked man's words. Do you really think the Hokage wouldn't try to stop you in your revenge against his wife and son? No, he would probably protect them over me. I'm going to have to kill him. No, of course not. You would need to go against the Hokage for your revenge, but if you go against the Hokage you go against Konoha too. I can't beat Konoha by myself as I am right now. I need to get stronger, and even then I might not be able to kill them. What is my plan for revenge then? I wanted to make them feel the same pain I'll do. Face it, you need allies, and we the Akatsuki are the only ally that can help you. In order to do that I can't just kill them, it would be a blessing to them. No, I have to take away everything they cherish. If you are interested, go to Amiga Core. 4 months later. So this is it, huh? Madara said to himself as saw the industrial hidden village of Ame, Rain. It had taken him about 2 weeks to travel to this place. When he had contemplated joining them, he knew that he would need at least some information. Why? Because joining some shady criminal organization without any knowledge on them would be a bad idea. It was quite simple. When he had asked about Akatsuki, it just so happened that Terumi May knew of them. From what she told him, they were a secret mercenary group that did S-class mission and above with absolute efficiency. That wasn't all either. Apparently all of them seemed to be Nukenans. That wasn't the most surprising thing either. The most surprising fact was that all of them, or the ones that were known, were S-class. Their distinct were the black coats with red clouds over them that they wore. Obviously if he, Uchiha Madara, wanted to join, he would need to get stronger. Oh, he was strong, alright, strong enough to be a S-class shinobi, but that only applied because of his EMS. Without it he would probably be a high A-class, and Madara knew it too. Which was why he took so long to arrive, as devoted most of his time to training himself so that his base skills were at least low S-class. It wasn't easy, and more often than not the only times he rested was when he fainted. He couldn't even begin to count how many times he had almost severely injured himself training. Most of them were from trying to perfect his Makuten. Senbenzakura Kagyoshi would release vibrant display of 1,000 cherry blossoms. It was a long and arduous task, especially considering how one had to keep himself safe from over 1,000. No, 100,000 would be a more suitable number. Yeah. Anyways, it was hard to keep oneself safe from 100,000 tiny blades shaped as sakura petals. But due to the result of his training, he had created his own personal brand of clones that were unique to him, as no one besides a Makuten user could created them, as far as he knew. Not only that, he had used Makuten, Senbenzakura Kagyoshi as a basis and made 2 more jutsu from it. Those 2 jutsus were Sunkei, Slaughterscape, and Goi, Mosscape. They were very devastating. But besides those 2 jutsus, Madara was especially happy with how he had shortened the creation of those blades, even if practicing it almost skewered him numerous times. He had first gotten the idea from watching the first match of the Chunin exams. Speaking of Chunin exams, he remembered the Uzumaki sword Najibana that Nawaki had. In his opinion, it was very insulting for that senju to have it, even if the clans were distant cousin clans. It wasn't that Madara disliked the senju, he just didn't like Senju Tsunade and Senju Nawaki, which were the last of the Senju clan. I should take that sword back next time I see him. Madara thought to himself, but currently he had more pressing matters to attend to. It should be obvious at this point that Madara decided to join. After all, with allies that consisted of S-class nins, it was definitely possible to have his revenge. Of course, he had no idea what the masked shinobi planned for him. He wouldn't even rule out the possibility that he wanted to use him, Uchiha Madara. He can try. But in the end I will be the one who stands on top. There was also another matter that made Madara very concerned. Dream flashback. Ni-san, what's your dream? An Uchiha of 17 years and long black hair asked me. The most defining on him were the bandages around his eyes, signifying that some sort of surgery was done on him. There was silence as my body seemed to ponder before saying. To make the Uchiha clan the greatest, there is Izuna. After all, you gave me these for this purpose, did you not? Izuna? Wasn't Izuna Madara's little brother? That must mean that I am reliving Madara's memories. My attention was forced back on Izuna as he began talking again. Ni-san, that's a great dream. But? I asked my little brother in a curious tone. Wait. Why did I start thinking of Izuna as my little brother? But I would prefer peace, Ni-san. It would make me very happy if you attained peace with the very eyes I gave you. That way at least I was at least some help in peace, and that it would proof of my existence. Peace, such a foreign concept for people such as us who are born in this era. Are these the real Madara's memories? Why peace? My mouth asked without my consent. I didn't even bother why he worded it as if he was going to die. Chances are, he would. In this time period, people and especially Uchihas with blindness do not tend to last long on the battlefield. Izuna smiled as he looked at me, because I couldn't hear what he had to say because my ears no longer worked. It was as if someone stuffed cotton in my ears. The scene continued to play until I went to sleep. As darkness overtook me, as darkness took over Madara, the scene changed. This time it was very gruesome. It was as if time slowed down just to spite me. Why? Because I was slowly watching my precious brother Izuna getting impaled by multiple shurikens and kunais. I could hear my very heart break into a million pieces. I told him, I told him not to go to the battlefield. Why Izuna? Why did you go despite knowing that you would die if you went? But why did you still go? My heart broke even more if it was possible as Izuna looked at me with his non-existent eyes and mouthed thank you NNNES-san. Dream flashback end. The second Madara, formerly known as Naruto, had recently begun to have dreams about the real and first Madara's life. He didn't know how it was possible, but he just knew that it did. Perhaps the merging process was going faster? After all, these dreams did start to appear only after Madara had used the EMS twice in 1 week. The dreams were all out of order too. Sometime it was when the real Madara and Izuna were kids, other times it was the constant battle with Senju Hashirama. These dreams sometime repeated too. The dreams were changing him and he knew it. It wasn't anything drastic like a change in elemental affinity, just more subtle ones. For one, he had become slightly arrogant and when he fights he calls it dancing. Madara had also gained some sort of brotherly love towards Izuna. He guessed it was because of all the memories he felt. He had slowly begun to acquire the real Madara love for Izuna too. Thinking about it, Madara smiled sadly. Why couldn't I have a brother like that or even a family like that too? He thought to himself in envy. But he was also grateful. Thanks to these memories he had known the love of a family even if it wasn't his own. Stop! Madara snapped out of his thoughts as he saw 2 Ame shinobi guards tell him to stop. Madara activated his Sharingan and used a mind-controlling genjutsu to make them let him pass. As Madara walked into the village he thought the 2 guards were strange. They had slash marks over their forehead protectors. Why did official guards of a shinobi village have slash marks on their forehead protectors? That wasn't all. Madara could tell that the rain here was laced with chakra. Suddenly heard the sound of beating wings and looked up with his Sharingan still activated. When he saw the suspicious signs of the village, Madara had decided to keep his guard up. Not that he would let it down as he was still suspicious of the masked Sharingan user. What appeared before was definitely an Akatsuki member as she wore the trademark cloak. She had blue hair and a beautiful face with a few makeup on it and a blue paper rose in her hair. The strange thing about it was that she had wings made of paper. That wasn't all either. It's her God's messenger. It's the angel of Ame. Similar words were spoken as the civilians bowed down in her presence. The Akatsuki member paid them no heed as she focused on Madara, studying him under her scrutinizing gaze that would a lesser shinobi back away. Madara however was not a lesser shinobi. Finally she spoke. Madara-san, please follow me. Madara nodded indicating that he heard. She nodded back as the paper seemed to be absorbed into her as she gracefully landed onto the ground and led Madara to wherever. It took about an hour but the blue-haired female led him to a wasteland area where it looked like it hadn't rained in years. Slowly Madara could see numerous figures appear and he even recognized a few of them. Hoshigaki Kisame, Kakuzu formerly of Taki, Waterfall. When his eyes settled on Uchiha Itachi, he felt as if he was looking at Izuna. It was weird, you know? To suddenly see the person who tortured you as a child with a genjutsu to look like a person you started to love like a little brother. Madara took his eyes off him as he knew it would be dangerous if his eyes lingered on Itachi too much. And Madara's eyes widened at the orange-haired person in the middle of the group. What surprised him were the Rinnegan eyes he had. I see you recognize these eyes of mine. The Rinnegan user said. I am known as Pain and I am the leader of Akatsuki. Madara nodded his head, as he listened. The blue-haired girl, he later came to know as Konan as she had introduced herself under Pain's order along with the rest of the Akatsuki members, went towards the group and stood next to Pain. Madara learned the names of the Akatsuki members that he didn't know about as Pain told them to introduce themselves. Pain, Konan, Sasori, Hidan, Itachi, Kisame, Zetsu. Madara briefly wondered where the masked shinobi who called himself Tobi was. He's probably a shadow player within Akatsuki here. I doubt all of them know of his existence. There is one more thing, Madara-san, Pain said as he caught the said person's attention. Suddenly 2 more people jumped besides Pain, one on each side. Madara's eyes widened as he saw both of them had Rinnegan like Pain and that they wore slashed forehead protectors of Ame just like Pain. I have to test you in order to judge whether you are capable enough to join, said the Rinnegan user on Pain's left. Madara studied them closely as it was weird that one of them would finish the other's sentence. What's more, Madara could tell that an external flow of chakra was being transmitted to him through the black rods and into their bodies. A sort of puppet technique? Madara thought to himself. He however didn't have any more time to think as all 3 of them charged at him. That's the end guys. If you enjoyed then make sure to leave a comment. This is Chaos Shinobi signing off.